I would like to call to order the regularly scheduled meeting of the Parks and Recreation Commission for Wednesday, September 28th, 2022. May we have a roll call, please?
Chair McGill,
Here.
Vice Chair Keck,
Present.
Commissioner Aldana,
Present.
Commissioner Clark, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton,
You.
Commissioner Longstreet,
Here.
Commissioner Anander LaBerge.
Here.
Okay, great, thank you. And I have been asked to remind everybody, and I'm the first one to have forgotten already, to use your microphones and make sure you speak into them. And with that, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Written public comment, we got two pieces of written comment over the last week, and they're both related to agenda items. And I didn't see anything else. Is there anything else that's come in?
No additional.
Okay, great, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission for up to 2 minutes on any subject within the jurisdiction of the commission that is not scheduled for a public discussion before the commission. Total amount of time for public comment will be 15 minutes. Those of you who are on the agenda, that will come later. Any going once? Okay, do we have anybody offline, on remote?
Anyone wishing to speak on a subject not on the agenda, please raise your hand using the Zoom control panel.
Nope. Okay, great, thanks. Okey doke, that then takes us to our committee assignment reports. Can't remember which way I started last time, so I'll start on my left. Commissioner Aldana.
All ready? Yes, I attended the Neighborhood Advisory Council. They meet every second Monday at 6 p.m. and there was good neighborhood issues to talk about. Also attended the Creeks advisory meeting. It was regarding the bird refuge project. There was a lot of information along with a lot of work to enhance the bird refuge. It was a good gathering.
Thank you. Commissioner Clark.
Hey, I was out of town for both the Park Foundation meeting and the STAC meeting. I did read all our STAC materials and do site visits to those trees, however. I also attended Creek Weeks. There was a craft night at the Crafters Library put on by Liz Smith and Jenna Hollywood, and I attended a coffee at the Creeks at Arroyo Open Space. They were both well attended, and there's a lot of information about creeks and what we can do to keep our watershed safe. And it was exciting to see how far the restoration project has gone at the open space since we did a volunteer tree planting in spring. So I think Creek Week was a success, and I enjoyed participating in it.
And Commissioner Clark made some drop-dead gorgeous coasters. Commissioner Longstreet.
I have nothing to report.
All right, Vice Chair Fleck.
I was not able to attend the Creeks Commission meeting.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Commissioner Anander LaBerge.
I had childcare challenges and was not able to attend my Arts and Crafts Committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I was unable to attend youth council, but they're working on some collaboration with Halloween and Christmas with the Police Activity League. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Those will be fun and popular activities, I'm sure. As far as me, I did go to the Park Foundation meeting this past week. It was primarily review of financials and funding, particularly with respect to the band shell. I went to the same open area creek coffee with a creek person. Actually, it was several creek people and project managers at the Arroyo Borough open area. Again, it's a beautiful restoration. It was exciting to talk to the project managers and the people currently working about it, and also talk about future plans as the restorations extend. And then I also attended the Parks and Recreation presentation to the Finance Committee, what, about 3 weeks ago now? Can't remember, lose track of time, and spoke on behalf of the commission.
Madam Chair, can I ask how the band shell fundraising is going?
Do we have that in the director's report? I don't recall that we do. I'll turn it to Director Zachary.
Chair McGill, Commissioner, Longstreet, we have about, total in hand, about $800,000 for the project. We're currently finalizing the bid specifications, the bidding package. There's some concern that bids will come in a little bit higher, so we're looking at options for how we might fund the difference. But we are planning to move forward. Project is essentially ready to put on the street, and hopefully we will be able to construct at the beginning of the year.
Thank you, that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Thanks. All right, that takes us to ceremonial items, employee recognition. I believe we have some this month, do we not?
Chair McGill, Commissioners, we have four this month. Levesque Kyle, who's a grounds maintenance worker in Parks and Recreation, received his 10-year pin for 10 years of service with the city. And Levesque is one of the staff members that works closely Eastside Parks, including our community gardens. We also had 2 employees get recognized for 15 years of service. Jim Rumbley, who is a project planner in the Creeks Division, largely involved in code enforcement and stormwater permit compliance work. And then Luis Casada, who's in our Parks Division, and he is a grounds maintenance crew leader. So Luis has been all over our park system and is very well versed in everything related to park operations. And then last but not least, we have Susan Jang Bardick received her 25-year proclamation for 25 years of service to the city of Santa Barbara.
Congratulations.
And I neglected to mention, Susan is now a senior recreation supervisor. She has been integral to the development and implementation of all of our special events, and then also the management of our beachfront facilities. So Susan brings a wealth of knowledge to all the new folks that we have on board too.
Okay, wow, thank you. There would be so much to say. I think I'm going to have to suffice and just say it's congratulations to everybody. I've been doing the math. What, we got 40, 20, 65 years total across the board in pretty much touching every part of the department or a large part of the department. It just, it's good to see that level of dedication and service to the city. And just want to say thank you to everybody. If anybody have anything to, yeah?
I would just add that Susan Jang Bardick really has over the years refined special events and she works interdepartmentally with that. And I'm sure last summer was quite a challenge with all the changes to parades and fiesta. So
Yeah.
she's owed a big debt of gratitude for all that work.
Yes, concur. And then, is that close enough? I got a little note saying I'm not close enough to the mic. Was it from you, huh? Okay, thanks. I feel like I'm like swallowing it. Okay, that then takes us to the minutes from previous meeting. And the recommendation is that the commission waive the reading and approve the minutes of the regular meeting of August 24th, 2022. And there's one thing that, I'm prepared for a motion. There was one suggestion that right before the meeting that we might have an amendment that going back to another set of minutes, the June minutes, we intended to amend them to say that there were members of the public at Ortega Park. So I would suggest that we amend, as part of this motion, that we make that amendment. Commissioner O'Donnell brought that to my attention.
Okay, and I'll make the motion to
Chair McGill, and Commissioners, those minutes were approved at the last meeting?
Yes,
So you would need to bring them back on
Well-
another agenda. And I believe in those minutes, we actually listed the individuals that spoke at
okay, well,
public
that's
comment.
just then, okay. Then we can just make an emotion then to approve.
I'll still make that motion to
So,
approve.
so based on the way in which we prepare the minutes, we list the people that spoke at public comment rather than indicating that so
Okay.
many people spoke at public comment.
That's good, thank you. Then I'll second it. All right, any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'll
So,
abstain.
and one abstention. Okay, thanks very much. And then that brings us to the trees. Mr. Slack, before you get started, okay, so you, 3C, I see it. I was going to see where Maury was. Okay. All right. Welcome, Mr. Slack.
Good afternoon, Chair McGill and Commissioners. The first Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a pepper tree. This is a street tree located within the public right-of-way at 1014A Calle de los Amigos. The applicant's requesting removal of the tree due to allergens and respiratory issues. The tree is directly in front of the applicant's home there. The committee reviewed the application. We performed a site visit, looked at the tree, discussion around the tree. There was a considerable amount of flower and fruit on this specific pepper tree. It is worth noting pepper trees, what we would call dioecious, so there's separate male and female parts. So some trees do have fruit and flowers, whereas others will just have essentially discrete flowers and no fruit production. And you can see that throughout the street. The same is true of the oak trees across the street as well. The committee noted the tree was in good health. I think there was general agreement with staff and the committee that the tree could benefit from some pruning. There was discussion about the concerns with the allergens and their impact to the residents. Comments from the committee involved essentially the large number of plants as well as trees in a general area and the significant number of allergens that all of those trees would produce. Again, there was specific reference to the oaks across the street, also known to be potentially or problematic to people with allergens. People can have high sensitivity to that as well. There was pretty extensive discussion around it. There's additional pepper trees that are planted as street trees fronting this community as well. And after review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the request for the removal of the pepper tree at 1014A Calle de los Amigos.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Slack? For the speakers, the way the process will work is we'll ask questions, then I'll call speakers up, and then we'll have discussion. Okay, thanks.
As far as the homeowners, do they have allergies?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, that is correct. The applicants are present today too, so they can explain their specific struggles with allergens.
Commissioner Clark. I guess I had one question just around the pepper trees. I mean, there was actually 3 of them in a row. I guess since the application actually used the word toxic, I went out and got my Western Garden book up and looked it up because and what with pepper trees it was referring to toxicity of dermatitis with the foliage, and you don't want to eat the berries. Sounds like they'll you sick, but they won't kill you. Are pepper trees known in particular for airborne allergens? And does that matter whether it's the dioecious, did you call it, the male, female, or just the flowering?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I think the pepper tree does produce a fair amount of pollen and allergens. And when you do talk about male and female tree species, the female will produce more allergens than the male species will.
Okay, thank you very much. If there,
One question. Sure. And then pollen is wind spread and air spread, so if that particular tree was removed, what's to keep allergens from the remaining pepper trees on that street from dispersing their pollen?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, you could easily make an argument that there would be a reduction. The extensive discussion that occurred at the committee level was that that specific tree removal would have, the measurable impact would be minimal, given the fact that the community itself is extensively planted with trees. There's other street trees fronting the community, and then across the street is a park space that has, is well vegetated with lots of trees, mostly oak trees. And so in the discussion with the committee, the driving rationale for the denial was that that individual removal would not have a profound impact on the allergens or pollen count in that area.
Thank you.
okay, thank you. If there are no further questions, we have a speaker on this tree. It's Barbara Smith. Please come forward. So I will admonish you, since I've been admonished twice now, to speak into the microphone. And you will have
2 minutes, right?
2 minutes, yes, indeedy. All right.
I'm old, so I'm going to read it. Good afternoon to everybody. My husband and I were very sad when we read the agenda and saw that a denial had been recommended for our request to have the pepper tree with its branches just almost right over our sidewalk and patio removed by the city. We have resided at 1014A Calle de los Amigos in Valverde for 3.5 years, and in that time the tree has not been trimmed by the city. It is filled with an abundance of, and I still use the word toxic because to us they are, at the moment, is about 10 feet from our patio, if that. My husband has COPD, he's 81, I'm 78, and have allergies and asthma. And although I understand that there are oak trees across the street, they're a good distance from us. They're not right in our face as this tree is right now. I will add that I've been on the garden committee at Valverde. I value trees, I value landscaping, but this one is just a continual problem for us. And I think I'm keeping the Kleenex industry in business with my almost constant congestion. And my husband, Wayne was so congested this morning with nasal block, cough, that he actually took a COVID test, which was negative. And we suspect that it was that pepper tree that was the culprit. We are willing to work with the city to replace the pepper tree, and as beautiful as it is, it's making our lives miserable. Please permit us to remove the pepper tree and replace it with a tree that is not as toxic as this one is. And as has been mentioned, there are 2 other pepper trees on either side of our very prolific berry-filled tree that have no berries. So we think we got the draw with the female tree. And as I said, we're willing to help in any way. And I have a saying that I live by, which is that problems are solutions waiting to happen. And it is my hope that we can find a solution to this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. Thank you for that. I'm glad you passed your COVID test. Open it up for discussion.
I have one more quick question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Mr. Aldana.
If we were to deny it, can the tree trimming be expedited?
And Chair McGill and Commissioner Aldana, as in previous trees that we've looked at, public trees that require pruning, we'll do our best to elevate it as much as possible in the event that the commission denies the request for removal.
And I'll just do a follow-up to that. Should it be denied and the homeowners want to do the pruning themselves, would you work would that be a way to expedite that?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, in this specific instance, and I think we've seen recent examples not too far in the past where it's been observed by staff that it needs pruned. And in those situations, when staff makes a determination that a tree needs pruned, we would schedule it and take care of it. Now, looking down the road, if distance to the home and things like that were of concern, they could absolutely reach out to us and we'd be happy to give them a permit to have an elevated level of maintenance performed to the tree. But in this instance, we would absolutely take care of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Vice Chair Feck.
If we do approve the removal, was there a discussion of like a replacement tree, something that wouldn't be maybe with the allergies, or any kind of recommendation?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Feck, there was very little discussion about approval of removal at the committee level. This section of street's kind of unique. We discovered during this process that there's currently not a designated street tree species. So we would be coming back at some point in the future, regardless of the decision made today, to designate a street tree species for that street.
Thank you. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I'm sorry if this is a silly question, but can you explain to me how many times a tree needs to be pruned? Is it like a haircut where I have to go every 6 weeks? How much time between good pruning are we talking about?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, you're asking a very good question of how often a tree needs to be pruned. I think Mr. Slack can answer. It depends on the species. I think where we're mostly challenged is we don't always have the resources, the financial resources to manage our street trees, but I'll have him answer further for you.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, yeah, to expand on that, I would say on average we have a 5-year pruning interval. That can vary significantly, and it's driven by age of the tree, the habit of the tree. So in this case, the tree's relatively young. As the applicant pointed out, it's low over the sidewalk, and that's a common thing when you're trying to train and develop a relatively young street tree. So in some instances, we're pruning a little bit more frequently, but I would say just to kind of frame it in terms of city work, we're about 5 to 7 years. So probably once every 5 to 7 years.
And is that recommended? What is the recommended pruning schedule regardless of how much funding the city has?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, yeah, no doubt resources affect the pruning intervals. If we had as much money as we wanted, we could probably prune the tree as frequently as we needed. The Smiths could call us and we could just send somebody out there. So no doubt resources are driving our pruning intervals. It is worth pointing out, though, that when we do prune, those are cuts and those are injuries to trees, and it does take time for the tree to recover. So we do try to kind of find a sweet spot there. But no doubt that 5 to 7, in some instances where we're talking, streets that have very well-developed mature trees, and we're talking like 8 to 10 year pruning intervals, a lot of it is just time and resource that's driving those pruning intervals.
I think that, sort of the nuance of the question was, if in a perfect world, how often would you be pruning this pepper tree?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Lesnar Buxton. So in a perfect world, with it being relatively young, you may say like every 2 to 3 years probably. And a lot of that would depend on just the growth rate and the way the tree was developing. As time passes, we would start to remove lower branches, we'd get more clearance, and then things like pedestrian and vehicular clearance wouldn't be as needed, and the pruning intervals would start to slow down. But I would say, like, given its age and what we saw on site during site visits, probably 2 to 3 years rather than maybe 5.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Okay.
I have a comment.
Okay, Commissioner Longstreet, you have comments, and I think that's a good segue.
Having made my site visit today, that area is very heavily forested. And it's beautifully forested, and this tree's removal would leave a hole. We have not, in my 25 years, taken out a tree for allergies, because as Mrs. Smith said, they suspect it. We don't have firm, hard evidence that this is the problem that we have. And there are 2 trees right next to it of the same species, although they may be males and females. With what's going on across the street with the beautiful lush plantings at Valverde, I don't know that this is the answer to the question, and where we are at right now environmentally is we can't afford to lose these big trees. So I support stack recommendation.
Okay, are you making a motion?
I would make a motion to support the stack recommendation to deny removal.
We have a motion. Do
I'll
we have?
second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second to support the stack recommendation. You know, I think it's a tough one when anybody is suffering and you think that there's potentially a cause and effect. I agree, it's a very heavily forested area though, and with a lot of pepper trees. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, is there
Vice Chair Feck.
any way we could explore more about like a recommendation for a street tree on that block? I mean, versus like leaving a hole, but you know, the applicant mentioned they are willing to work with the city on some sort of alternative rather than just leaving an empty space, maybe putting another tree.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Feck, I think one thing that we've not spoken in any great detail about yet, and Commissioner Longstreet kind of alluded to, and this was certainly some of the commentary that happened at the committee level, is every application's unique and specific to that single application, but there's general concern of setting a precedent. So when we approve one tree for removal because of allergens or irritants or whatever it may be, we really jeopardize opening the door to lots of removals citywide. It becomes very challenging to defend applications for tree removal for similar reasons. And so I think regardless, as I pointed out to you a little earlier, we will evaluate a designation for this street. I think that it's important to kind of focus on Commissioner Longstreet's comments in regards to the history and then also the long-term implications of approving a removal due to something like pollen or irritants as a street tree.
Yep, thanks. So I'm going to propose, unless somebody's just got a burning comment, that since we do have a motion and a second, that we go ahead and take a vote.
I know I've mentioned it before, but if we could just expedite the trimming, help these residents out, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, pepper trees can grow fast.
Just my one comment is, I do support denying the removal, but as a nurse, my heart goes out to you guys. I hope you find your solution. I want you guys to be happy and healthy, but I think the commission does not take this lightly. We're looking at the health of the entire community, but you're just as important. So I just want to acknowledge that we do care for you as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we have a motion on the table. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Okay, so the motion is passed. I will want to make sure that you are aware, I'll just read it. Any action of the Parks and Recreation Commission made pursuant to the Municipal Code 1520 may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days pursuant to provisions of Section 13050. So this is appealable to City Council within 10 days. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is the request to remove a blue gum located at 214 Eucalyptus Hill Drive. This is actually in the rear of the property along Eucalyptus Hill. The applicant, who is not the property owner in this specific instance, is requesting the removal of the blue gum due to multiple listed reasons: declining health, fear of concerns of it falling into the road. If you were able to perform a site visit, you did see that other trees in the area have been removed. Those trees have been outside of the setback of the property, and prior to allowing the application to go through, we did confirm with the applicant and the property owner that they were in agreement with pursuing this specific tree removal. And it's important to note that on the application, the applicant did express an interest in planting 2 native coast live oaks to mitigate this specific tree. The committee reviewed the blue gum eucalyptus. They noted it was in fair health, kind of right on the threshold of poor. Pretty poor maintenance practices over the years. The canopy's been kept nice and tight. Pretty heavy pruning, leading to lots of water sprouts along the stem. And there was general agreement that the tree was, I would say, of relatively low value to the site. The applicant, despite removing some other eucalyptus that were outside of the setback, did retain a few native coast live oaks scattered throughout the area. And the conversation quickly moved towards, was there benefit from a sort of a good forest management perspective with the retention of the blue gum, or moving towards the proposed replacement trees of the native coast live oaks and the long-term value that they would provide to the area. The committee in discussion, and I think a lot of that was driven kind of by the large scale of open space that had been created in that general area, was in agreement that the removal could be supported from a good forest management perspective, but that 3 native coast live oak trees at a minimum 15-gallon made more practical sense and would help to better offset the loss in biomass of the area. And after review, made a motion or recommendation to approve the removal on the condition that 3 minimum 15-gallon native coast live oaks were planted within the front setback of the property at 214 Eucalyptus Hill Drive. And during that review, made a recommendation that the commission could use the principles of good forest management as a finding to support the removal.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions? Commissioner Longstreet.
As I recall, in that area, after the Tea Fire, with the wildland fire specialist, we did go through and remove trees because that isn't an important access back into that area. I recall going up there with Ann Marks and looking at trees. So I mean, I understand. That's why I think there's so little left of the large trees, is because the fire department was pretty adamant that they needed to maintain that roadway for fire access. I think it was, but I think it was way before anybody else's time.
I wasn't here.
But yes. So I do what you were saying about there not being any large trees. I think that's why.
Any other questions? If not, I have a couple. Nope. I didn't bring a tape measure, I'll confess, but some of those trunks looked really, really as close to the wall as the tree in question. Is just the setback. I should have brought a tape measure, I didn't do that.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the private tree care company that did the additional removals reached out to staff, and the city street tree supervisor went out there and met them on site, and they did an accurate measurement to make a determination on it. But I do agree they were very close to one another.
Yeah. And I guess my real question is, because I was sure somebody had a tape measure, the 3-to-1 replacement ratio, I mean, I understand that there is a fair bit of open space there, but if it were, I mean, I guess I'm going to, the background conversation I'm having is what's consistent, what's a normal application? What would we normally be asking for in terms of a replacement ratio? And is it reasonable to say, well, okay, well, we're just going to up it because there's more space?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I think that some of the rationale certainly revolved around the additional removals that took place. I think that the discussion, again, going back to the sort of the balance of, is the retention of this tree better than planting new trees? And the committee really kind of looking at that in great detail. They just made a determination that in this specific instance, 3 trees made more sense than just 2. And I do think that a lot of that was given the open space and just trying to offset the comprehensive loss in this specific instance.
Okay.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, it's a discretionary decision that you're making regarding the number of trees to be
understand, yeah.
replanted. And it sounds like the Street Tree Advisory Committee took all the factors into consideration and are suggesting you concur with their recommendation that there be 3 instead of 2.
Yeah, yeah, thank you, yeah. Any other questions? If not, we do have a speaker. It is a member of STAC, Tony DeMola. Oh, there you are. Oh, well, guess what? It says B. Ha-ha, no worries. Okay. Yes, please, I forgot, neglected to do that last time. Yes, do we have any speakers online?
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom control panel.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, since we have no speakers, I will open it up for discussion and/or a motion as appropriate.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we concur with the Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for the removal at 214 Eucalyptus Hill Drive. On the principles of good forest management will be best served by the proposed removal and the replacement with 3 15-gallon Coast Live Oaks.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? All right, in that case, I'll take a vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, so moved. And that takes us to the third, which is Modoc Road.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review is to request to remove, it's a total of 9 trees. That's 1 red ironbark, 7 manna gum, in both eucalyptus species, and then a lemon-scented gum, which is now a corymbia, no longer a eucalyptus. The applicant is requesting the removal of all the trees due to comprehensive landscape improvements that they were hoping to perform in front of the community. Is comprehensive landscape improvements involving tree removal, tree replacement, lots of landscape improvements, and like a bioswale element for stormwater mitigation as well. As part of the rationale, there was an arborist report included in the attachments where they identified reasons for each specific tree. A lot of that had to do with the trees, long-term development adjacent to these overhead utility lines, and the trees being subject to continual utility pruning, which as a result, the growth response has moved towards the community over the garage the carports along that area. Concern with debris, potential limb failure, just general structure of each tree, and those were sort of the primary driving reasons for the request of the removal, in addition to the landscape improvements. We spent a lot of time out here. A lot of discussion was had regarding these trees. Each individual tree was looked at in close detail. Some of the comments from the committee were the general lack of maintenance on the community side. And so, anytime that the tree's heavily pruned due to utilities, it generates what we would call like a growth response. Trees need leaves, so they're going to move away from that and these canopies have just slowly, over time, encroached further and further towards the community and over these carports, garages. And so I think the committee made comments that there had been just a general lack of maintenance on that side of the trees, and that would help to alleviate a lot of these structural concerns that were pointed out in the arborist report. And the other big component that was behind the rationale for the committee's recommendation was just the sheer size of the trees. All but one of the trees was in just fantastic health, really, from the committee's perspective. And the comments from the committee was that even if replaced, in a lifetime, that you're probably never going to see trees like this here. And ultimately, after review, the committee made a recommendation to deny the request for the removal of all the trees along 3775 Modoc Road.
Thank you very much. I will open it up for questions. I have a number. I'm sure others do as well. Okay, I'll let rip. Buxton.
I'm a little unclear on the project that required the removal of the trees.
That was basically the gist of my first question, too. Yeah. So, I mean, so what Jacob's asking is really for a little bit more information about the project. Specifically for me, when I looked at the material that was sent over yesterday, day before, I did not pick up on the storm water retention or whatever it is in the original application. That seemed to be new information to me, at least. And I was wondering, again, I would like Commissioner Leston Buxton know a little bit more about the project and how much of the storm water runoff aspect of it was discussed, and is that something that can be accommodated in keeping the trees?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the project landscape architect is here, and I think he could probably frame the actual scope of work and what the hope is for the project better than I can. I do roughly recall some stormwater element. I think but in this specific instance, when we're talking about setback trees, the committee is looking purely at the tree and whether there's any driving rationale for the tree removal. So those things weren't really taken into great consideration. None of the, even though there were trees proposed for planting, those were, very minimally discussed because there was just general consensus that the trees were large and healthy enough and of enough value that their removal would be a detrimental loss to the community.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that answers your question. I can't really speak to the project in great detail, but in response to Commissioner Lesnar Buxton's question, I think that certainly things could be done in that area that would not require tree removal. Like you could landscape the area and still incorporate the trees. I'm sure others have different opinions, but I think that it certainly would be doable to make project improvements without requiring tree removal in this specific instance.
Okay, thank you. So then I have two other questions. One, the tree with the psyllids, which was what the second one in from the east, is that one that ordinarily you would treat or remove? I mean, how serious is that, I guess is what I'm really asking.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, we would consider that relatively a cosmetic pest. Okay. Treatments are available that have efficacy. The tree was of the 9 trees, it was in the poorest shape, but it still, from the committee's perspective, didn't warrant approval for removal, or at least in terms of a recommendation. Again, I think depending on who you speak to, there may be varying opinions about the severity of the psyllid activity on any tree in town. Like say you parked your car under it, you may have a completely different opinion, but I think in terms of what the pest does to the tree, we would consider it to be non-life threatening.
Okay, thanks. And then last question. Again, in the information that was sent out a day or so ago, there was sort of a primer on pruning and topping, and it was talking about really the assertion was that the amount of pruning that would be required now to bring these trees into well, shape line, whatever you want to say, would exceed guidelines in terms of percentage of topping and percentage of pruning. At least that's the way I read the documentation. Could you comment on that, please?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I think when we look at these trees, we could ask ourselves, when was the last time they were pruned? And I don't have that information. I think it's been quite a while, and the trees have subsisted for a really long time without any pruning. Was some noted, structural issues that could be managed. I think that, as the tree owner, their goals and what they would like the canopies to look like could vary differently than, say, my independent opinion as the city arborist. And these are on private property, so that, they have a lot of latitude in regards to their pruning. Title 15.24, the preservation of trees, which is what regulates these trees, doesn't require a permit for pruning, but it does require that best management practices be performed and that no more than 25% of the canopy can be reduced within a 12-month interval. So really if the trees were retained, the long-term approach would be like a phased pruning. The expectation, I think, in any case, if you're trying to thoughtfully manage large trees, is that you act with a fairly delicate hand, and nothing has to happen overnight. You don't have to just cut every limb off of one side of a tree, especially when it's been developing that way for an extremely long period of time. So I think if, say this was my tree in my front yard, I would take a thoughtful, gradual approach to canopy reduction, focusing on managing overextension so that you could eliminate some of these structural concerns that were noted in the arborist report.
So slow and consistent.
Yes.
Okay.
Chair McGill and Commissioners too, we don't have any information about the design of this stormwater detention facility either, so you may want to take that into consideration.
Yes, yeah, I was, it definitely, I did not see it in the original application, yeah. Commissioner Longstreet.
Usually developments of this size have some sort of planting plan requirements that came with their building permits. Does this have any of that where they've been through ABR and they have those kind of regulations on them?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Longstreet, in this specific instance, really the scope of work just is occurring within the setback, and so that's why we're reviewing the trees in this isolated specific instance. So in a different situation, if it was significantly comprehensive in scope, it may have not been something that we see, and it may be referred to community development, but in this specific instance with the trees being in the setback, it was forwarded to review at the Street Tree Advisory Commission level.
Okay, thank you. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it to public comment. I have 4 slips, 2 of which belong to staff members. I will call you up in the order I received the slip, and each of you will have 2 minutes. So the first person is, I think that's a Jake. Correct. Jake Minnick. Please come forward.
Can we share what's going on the screen?
Yeah, I'll wait till you get
Great,
started.
thank you.
Okay. Just as, I'll give you a second here. All righty. Okay, your time starts now.
Great. Thank you very much, Commissioners. My name is Jake Minnick. I'm a landscape architect, arborist with RM Design Group here representing this project. And I wanted to just jump right into the factors for removal since we've been going back and forth on it. It wasn't mentioned in too much detail, but as we looked into it, the stormwater treatment basin here retains water. That's down here in the bottom part of the screen. The tree roots will be impacted by the installation of that stormwater device. It's a couple feet deep, requires quite a bit of excavation. And the reason for it is because of a recent change to some of the flood mapping in response to Thomas Fire and debris flow in 2018. And it's actually put the entire development within a flood zone. So there's a phased plan where we're planning to actually add retention basins throughout the project to actually store some of that flow and keep the residents of this home safe. And the other factor for removal is essentially we have 100+ foot trees planted almost directly beneath power lines. Those are high voltage power lines, roughly 50 feet above them. They're going to be pruned for, as long as they're there on an annual basis, most likely on the utility side. And although there hasn't been much pruning on the private side, I think a phased removal of some of that canopy would be successful, but it's going to keep growing back. That's really where about 50% of essentially that tree has been cut in half, and the 50% that's left is on that side. So as we keep cutting it, it's going to keep growing back in that direction. And just following SoCal Edison's guidelines, trees of this size really shouldn't be planted within 70 feet of an overhead line, and we're planted within, in some instances, 4 feet. It's not something that we can use to remove those trees, but it's a guideline for future planting of trees, which is why we've selected the right tree for the right place at a 1.5 to 1 ratio.
And you're out of time.
Thank you.
But I think you got the gist of it out there.
Great.
Yeah, thanks. Matter of fact, I know you got the gist of it out there. Thank you very much. And then Tony DeMola, you're next. Oh, let me stop. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hello. Okay,
Sharon
here we
McGill,
go.
Commissioners, thank you. I am a board-certified master arborist. I am currently credentialed, and I am here on behalf of the STAC committee where I volunteer. I am here to represent not only myself, but most of the members who aren't here today. We did spend a lot of time looking at this site and considering the request that was made. And a lot of this is going to be reiterating Nathan's statements, because he did basically say everything that we were thinking. We feel that these removals are really not necessary. And their intention is, I think, misdirected. They want to improve the site, and that's, of course, can be done, but it can be done without removing these trees. These specimens have been here a long time. They are in at least fair to good health, except for one that may have an ailment. And for the whole group to be removed because of one, I don't think is justified. Structurally, there are some issues that can be mitigated through normal arboricultural practices. Pruning, I think the investment to replace and re-landscape that area is a much higher investment that can be done by regular arboricultural services as far as pruning goes. And we just really felt that the benefit of these trees, these mature specimens, greatly outweighs the removal and the replacement. The biomass that's going to be removed will never be regenerated in our lifetimes. The wildlife habitat that is established there, carbon sequestration, ambient temperature cooling of the entire area. To be honest, we were not aware of the floodplain issue, but I'm thinking that there may be a way to mitigate that as well.
Okay.
As far as, okay,
Yeah, you're out of time.
okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks very much. Okay, and we do have one more. It's, no, Maury. I skipped Maury. Sorry. Okay, Maury Treeman.
Commissioners and Chair. Thanks for the moment to speak. We spent, as you've heard, a long time on this site, and in addition to what Tony and Nathan have expressed, we found that just the structure of the establishment of the senior housing, the garages are along the street and underneath the tree canopies, And then there's a wide driveway, and then the residences. And that driveway allows a very convenient bucket truck to prune the trees on a regular basis very easily. If that had been done, we wouldn't be here today. The looks of the trees would not be so abhorrent. And I think that I'm guessing, and perhaps they will let us know, whether we have new people in position that are determining this new project to enhance the site. And if that's the case, they might not have control over what's already been done or not done. And I do not think that they understand the value of the trees to them that support their goals to enhance the property without removing them all and then replacing them, which is going to be expensive to remove them, remove the stumps, have them ground, and then plant 24-inch boxes, what they say they'll do. And that would be oak trees. And I doubt that in any of our lifetimes, even our young ones here, would see the canopies replaced. So their goal is a good one, to enhance the property for the seniors and for the community. But the community values these trees because they're already well established. And they can be, they're in balance now, their canopy imbalance caused by pruning for utilities can be mitigated and done so well. And as we said, it would have to be done. Great.
You're done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you very much. All right, stop. Preset. All right, now we're down. And it is Tucker, yes? Douglas Tucker? You've outclassed me in handwriting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Chicken scratch is what it's called.
Yes. All right,
So I
and you
type
have
everything.
2 minutes.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much.
So just give you a little bit of background. VISTA was founded by the Federation Assisting California Teachers. It's a nonprofit with about 203 residents living there and about up to 50 staff members living there at any given time. It would be very easy for us to prune the trees and upgrade the landscaping, but after the Thomas floods, we took in approximately 118 evacuees, had 18 staff members living at our campus, and at any given time, the most we took in evacuees was 36. So we saw the devastation of the Thomas floods and the Thomas fires. When FEMA raised the floodplain 3 feet, we took it very seriously, invested a lot of resources in bringing in a hydrologist and doing hydrology studies to determine the flow of water. The flow of water that will impact our campus goes from the northwest corner and then will travel through the campus to the southeast, meaning that where this bioswale that we're planning on putting in will manage most of the water that comes into the campus. This is not an issue of necessarily enhancing the campus. While that is a goal, for us it's more of an issue of trying to protect lives and save the residents that we are caring for. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. Yep, let me see if we have anybody online.
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom control panel.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, so this is obviously a complex issue and a very well-established canopy, so I will open it up for discussion and/or motions.
I guess just a point of clarification. So it sounds like there may be 2 separate things. So there's this project for the stormwater, and then, so I don't know if the plans when that slideshow were shown initially. I guess I'm a little confused on, like, I don't even know how to ask it, but it sounds like you're wanting to build something that's underneath the trees that's going to help with this flood issue. And that's what's driving the tree removal? I'm sorry for the confusion, I just want to make sure.
And on your way out, if we could do a speaker slip for you since, yeah, so we know who you are.
Chris Dufour, landscape architect with RM Design Group. So we are proposing to do frontage landscaping along that frontage. As part of that, it's going to be a bioswale to take in some of the water that Doug was talking about. We're trying to capture as much of the water as we can. We have worked with the engineers. The engineers have indicated that they cannot get the bioswale in place with the grading, with those trees in place. So admittedly, when we went to ABR, we also knew that we had to come to a street advisory committee for the trees. It became a little separated, so my apologies for the confusion on that. But yes, we are hoping to get the trees removed in order to get a bioswale in there. And the trees, it was mentioned before, would be oaks. We've admitted and updated the plans since then, realizing that, well, oaks are going to grow up right through the power lines just the same. So we are bringing in a new proposal for more trees, more mitigation, but shorter trees.
Can I further ask, where are you in the ABR process?
Yeah, that was news to me, too.
I believe, and I'm still working on the process, we're not through final, but we are through conceptual, I believe.
Okay, because to me, that's a big deal, that we're seeing something where we're going to tell you you can take out trees when you don't even have any of this approved.
Yeah.
And as someone who spent the last 16 years managing a gigantic eucalyptus tree on low-income senior housing project, we trimmed it every 2 years. And we were a nonprofit also, low-income senior housing. So, you know, right now I'm feeling a little like we're getting the cart before the horse here.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just as long as we know who you are, that's,
Can I ask,
so, yes.
can I ask Mr. Slack a question? On the application, I don't see anything about a flood plan or a bioswale. When it came to Stack, because the reason that was on the application for removing these 9 trees is that they've outgrown their current location. There's nothing about a bioswale or a floodplain or mitigation for that. Were the Stack committee members aware of a different stated driving force for the removals?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Clark, real quick before I answer that question, I think, you know, we're seeing stuff increasingly sooner because planning requires that the tree removal process it's part of the application completeness. So we're trying to get the tree removal issues sorted out well in advance of, you know, these full board approvals, which is something that the commission's been requesting for many, many years, and we've now got it kind of shored up. So one of the difficulties is sometimes we do see things a little early. In response, there was some stormwater discussion. It was relatively brief, and the applicant has since provided additional information, and as the landscape architect alluded to, they've modified the planting plan and added, you know, the floodplain thing. So those were relatively new things that were not discussed at great length at the committee level. I also can say from about an hour on site that I don't think any of that would have any bearing on the committee's recommendation.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little frustrating for me to read the packet and then get the follow-up information that seemed like it had some fundamentally different information in it. And I'm certainly not in a position to approve the removals at this point. And it's just, my question is a question of do we deny or do we deny without prejudice?
I also have another question, which is then there's trees being replanted in the bioswale. The trees have to come out to build the bioswale, but then we're going to replant trees in the bioswale. So
yeah, it's not making sense.
Yeah, and this is not our expertise. So, you know, I am not one to be able to make a determination on whether this is adequate, and I'm not going to condemn those trees until all of that's clear.
But we are pretty good at logical thinking. It's just not quite adding up right now. Yeah. Any?
So bioswale is an area where water can permeate and percolate through the ground into a reservoir, if you will, maybe a non-formal reservoir.
Chair McGill, Commissioner Clark, the design of a stormwater facility really depends on its purpose. Bioswales are often used to actually address water quality. I think if the commission wants additional information about what is being proposed in terms of the design here, that may be something you consider asking for and defer any further evaluation of this application.
That's kind of where I'm coming from. It's a question of, yeah. I don't.
My only question was, would it have to go right under those trees, which is why I was trying to picture it in my mind. That's it.
But I don't think we have the information for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But that's a question, you know, are permeable pavers, there's other areas that handle water. And again, like I'm saying, it's not my expertise, but these trees, if I were a resident of that property and those trees were taken out so that I got to look at those wires and have all the train and I mean, they take some of the grit and grime from the freeway and from the train and from a lot of things, I wouldn't be happy. So, I mean, I see them as a real benefit.
So, is anyone, we can continue discussion, or we can go with a motion and then see where that, because I think we're all kind of converging on basically the same level of discussion.
So are we headed towards denial, or are we headed towards postponing this for a month for more information? You know, like I said, I am not qualified to evaluate a bioswale design and the necessity of it. So
I would be happy
Or
to
the-
deny without prejudice, because I believe that the staff deserves to have all the information, and as does this committee. Okay, so I'll be prepared to make a motion to deny without prejudice removal. I don't have the address in front of me.
It's right here.
Oh,
Of the, no,
Oh, you don't need this one because we're not, yeah.
of the 9 trees. On 3775 Modoc Road, without prejudice.
I'll second.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay.
I guess, is it better to deny it or to defer it? Like, what's the right terminology, I guess, if we're going to come back and discuss it again?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I think you have two options. In the past, historically, the commission has made referrals, so a motion to refer back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee, which would give them the opportunity to review the additional information that was presented to the commission in advance of the commission meeting that the committee did not see. And it would also allow for the committee to have additional dialogue with the applicants and the applicants' landscape architects in regards to this stormwater element and the need for it and its proposed location.
So can I ask just a follow-up, sorry. In your opinions, which is the best route to go to get us to the best answer? You know, to really get to the right place at the right time?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the applicants have indicated that they're in the process of either submitting an application to ABR for other improvements, or perhaps have, without that additional information, I think referring it back gives the opportunity for that to come forward.
Okay. So then should we?
I'll amend my motion.
Okay.
And I'll take back the deny without prejudice to refer back to the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
I'll second that.
Okay. We have a revised motion. And second? Any? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So moved. So we will no doubt see you again. Thank you very much. And thank you. All right, and now we are going to master plans.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation for review hopefully will be a little easier for everybody. It's a request to modify an existing street tree designation for Olive Vernon Road. Some of you may recall reviewing a very large redwood that was in the front setback of a property back in June of 2021. The commission approved the removal of that setback tree on the condition the applicant plant a new tree in the setback and also a street tree. We've been working with the project landscape architect for quite a while as they've been doing the property improvements, and they're at a point in time where they're ready to plant the street tree. The designated street tree for this street previously was London plane tree, which is a hybrid species of sycamore. It's interesting to note that, and you'll start to see us doing these things much more frequently as we tackle objectives in the urban forest management plan, where we are phasing out undesirable species. So the London plane tree has documented problems with hybridizing with the native California sycamore. So it's long been something that we've wanted to target, and now since we're really looking at these designations, that's a really good example of something that just doesn't belong in the public right-of-way. The name of the riparian area adjacent to Vernon's eluding me at the time, but there's native sycamores right across the street, and it is within the creek system, so it's even more important that we phase this tree out. In this instance, the applicant, landscape architect, had a desire to plant the proposed species, which is the Marina madrone. Staff reviewed it, found it to be very compatible with the available rooting volume, parkway width, and just the general site challenges all along Vernon Road. Made a recommendation to the committee to change the designation to the Marina madrone, and after review, the committee made a recommendation to change it to Arbutus marina or Marina madrone, sorry.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Mr. Slack? Okay. I don't have any speaker slips. Do we have anybody online?
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom control panel.
No? No. Okay. So with that, I will open it up for discussion and/or a motion. They're such pretty trees. There's my discussion.
I would move that we concur with the street tree designation for Olive Vernon Road for the London plane tree. No, wait a minute.
The
present species, okay. For the madrone.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. On to Mountain Avenue.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the next street tree designation for reviews. Actually, this is 1,300 to 2,100 blocks of Mountain Avenue. It's essentially all of Mountain Avenue. The catalyst for this review was actually a recent setback tree approval back in May of 2022, where a setback tree was approved for removal on the condition that a new street tree be planted. When we started looking at the street tree specifically for the 1,300 block, it was Australian willow, which has long been used in the community. Was a tree of merit, but has a lot of structural issues. It's not a very good performer. And that, when we looked at Mountain in full scope, it had queued up a couple times on several different blocks. And there were a few other species that were proposed for other blocks that also were less than desirable. And I think as we continue to look at these things, you'll see that we're looking at the full street in scope rather than separating it out block by block by block. And in review, trying to find, a mixture of trees, it may be 2, in this case it happens to be 5, that provide us with lots of options for planting, also availability in finding species, matching spaces. The little trees you can kind of shoehorn into, smaller spaces, whereas the larger trees where we're trying to maximize canopy cover, can be used in more adequate spaces where those trees can perform. The applicant provided lots of choices as well, so we took those into consideration. The committee had lots of discussion, and then ultimately after review made the recommendation to change the designation to crepe myrtle hybrids. That's actually several different trees within the crepe myrtle species. Essentially a slight difference in growth habits, but mostly color, like the floral colors, the real difference there. The Arbutus marina in this case as well, the maidenhair, commonly referred to as ginkgo, Catalina cherry, and the gold medallion were recommended for the 1,300 to 2,100 blocks of Mountain Avenue.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions? I guess I have one quick one. When approving a list like this, and certainly I appreciated the degree of research that the applicant in question provided to you. My question is that then once that street tree does get planted, is that the city's choice entirely? Do you work with the applicant if there's a preference?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, that's a great question. And I think that when we start to sort of reimagine these designations, having 5 species does allow for flexibility in decision-making. You know, I think if we were comprehensively planting the street, it would be very challenging and cumbersome to solicit everybody's individual opinions on species, right? So, but in the case of this specific instance where you have a condition and a street tree is planted, if you know, an applicant has a preference, they certainly could, you know, choose the tree. But I think, again, you know, we have to have a bit of like agency when we do larger scale plantings so that we can plant, you know, whatever we deem is most appropriate.
Okay, thanks very much. Anybody else have any questions? Oh, Commissioner
No, I
Rogers?
just have a comment. I think there are places that it's wonderful to have single species plantings and they look beautiful. And then there's neighborhoods where I like this, where it feels more individualized, where it feels more neighborhood. So I appreciate this recommendation to have, and I think it'll help homeowners take more ownership of their street trees in front of their houses. So thank you for this.
Yeah. Okay, I do not have a speaker slip, but do we have anybody online?
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom control panel.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. Because I did drive from 2100 block to the 13. I believe it was right in the 1700 block. I know it doesn't pertain to us, but there's no sidewalk. And when I was driving, there's people walking, bicycle, jogging. It's a little semi-cluster, and there's no sidewalk. If we can just let Public Works know, just to take a peek and assess and put it on their list.
I think they have the whole, that whole area mapped out because they just go through grid by grid, and those annual projects we used to see at Neighborhood Advisory Committee, I think, come before
Okay,
them.
Okay, we'll just leave it at that.
That was my assessment, so I'd just like to mention it.
Yeah, I walk it almost every day, so yeah. Okay, so do we have, do we have a motion? I don't think we do.
Oh, perfect. I would like to make a motion to change the street tree designation for the 1,300 to 2,100 blocks of Mountain Avenue to designation of crepe myrtle, Marina madrone, maidenhair, Catalina cherry, and gold medallion.
I'll second that. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, moved, and then Los Olivos.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the last Street Tree Advisory Committee recommendation is the request to change the street tree designation for the 0 to 500 blocks of West Los Olivos Street. The reason why we're looking at this is part of comprehensive tree planting efforts for the urban forestry program for the fiscal year 2023. So we've identified a pretty large area within sort of what you would maybe consider the Oak Park neighborhood to do consolidated tree plantings. And as part of that, we look at the existing street tree designations, if they make sense. We're trying to prioritize their redesignation when we find things that just don't make good practical sense. And again, similar to Mountain Avenue, there were lots of species that were designated on a block-by-block basis that have fallen out of favor for one reason or another. So when we looked at this street, I think you'll find we're going to continue to take the same approach where we look for the large canopy tree to try to maximize canopy cover on street. And then we kind of sprinkle in trees that have a little bit more utility. They're smaller, don't get as tall. And that's kind of what you're seeing here with this recommendation for these 4 different species. And after pretty extensive discussion and review, the committee recommended the use of camphor, desert willow, coast live oak, and heartleaf robinsonella, which actually is not designated. So it'll be the first time that we're actually planting this species of street tree in the city of Santa Barbara.
Great, thank you. Any questions? All right, I have no speaker slips. Anybody online?
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom control panel.
Okay, discussion or motion?
do have one question.
Okay.
Okay. So I've noticed with the last couple ones that we've looked at and with this one, the ones that were previously designated as the species, and I'm not sure if it was official or unofficial from whenever way back these got designated, but it doesn't seem that any of the ones that had been previously designated are continuing on as far as, for whatever reason that those were designated previously, those reasons are out the window now, and we're going with something entirely different. Why is there no continuity?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Unander-Laberge, I think what we're seeing is a prioritization of species that are poorly performing for one reason or another. So I think the reason why you might not see, say, jacaranda come up is because it's already designated a lot. It's a great tree, and we have no reason to change it. So the Victorian box, for example, is a tree that we've had lots of trouble with for various reasons. It's suffering significantly from like water scarcity issues, and it has pathogen problems as well. So I think that's what you're seeing. These designation changes have been identified for one reason or another, which we could do a better job of maybe pointing that out in the staff report as well in regards to rationales why we're sort of making a pivot from the existing designation. But a lot of these designations have been in existence since 1977, so a lot has changed over that time.
One follow-up question. Let's say there was a tree designation for a particular street, and the community, the residents in that particular neighborhood really like those trees, but if they weren't thriving because of current conditions, is there something that more could be done? Like I notice on Anapamu, there's those water, for lack of a better word, the water containers that I think are near some of those trees. At what point do we try and preserve what is in taking steps like that versus throw the whole thing out and let's start all over?
Well, Chair McGill and Commissioner Unander-Laberge, the designation changes doesn't mean that we don't maintain and preserve what's there already. It's just looking forward for what we plant in the future. Everything in terms of like mature tree care is resource limited. In the case of what's been done on Anapamu, those are designated historic trees, the 400 and 500 block. So there was a lot of like community concern when the drought was at its peak, 7-8 years ago. And that's what drove that. So I think every situation's specific. We try to honor the past and what performs well we want to continue to use. But some things, whether they perform well or not, just aren't grown in the nursery industry anymore. And there's really not a mechanism to preserve their use for future generations when they're just not available for planting anymore.
Thank you very much. Great. Would somebody like to make a motion? Oh, come on, don't.
I will make a motion for the street tree designation in the 0 to 500 blocks of West Los Olivos for the camphor, the desert willow, coast live oak, and the heartleaf Robinsonella.
Good job.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Moved. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Slack. And now we are on to our director's report.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, just in the interest of time, you have three business items ahead of you. One is an action item, number 6. Number 7 is pretty significant presentation. I would really like just to note quickly the Santa Barbara Beautiful Awards for the Cabrillo Pavilion and the Cabrillo Ballpark. It was a wonderful event. National Public Lands Day and our commitment as a department to work in interagency and with volunteers to maintain trails wherever we can. And then also point out that I did put at the end of the agenda, our plan for your meeting next month is to actually delve into outreach that we do with the community regarding urban forest management, which I think will help address some of the questions and interests of the commission. In November, the capital projects update, and then our 5-year CIP. And December just has our advisory committee appointments. But I'd like to actually turn over the presentation to Recreation Manager Rich Hanna to talk about the phenomenal achievements of our lifeguard program and individuals.
kidding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zachary, Chair McGill, and Commissioners. Rich Hanna, Recreation Manager. You have a lot of detail in your director's report, and we'll be talking about summer camps after this, so I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief. But the Junior Lifeguard Program here in Santa Barbara has a rich history since 1971 of really providing a robust program for youth to learn skills, camaraderie, self-esteem, and then compete, both at a regional and a state, and then also at a national level. These competitions are hosted throughout the state and also throughout the country. This year, for this summer, we sent 20 entrants to the regional championships and 20 to the national championships. Both were conducted in California. These competitions bring individuals from all across the state to compete individually, agency-wide, and then also are used to determine who represents the United States in competitions abroad. Out of the competitions this year, there were 27 agencies at the regional championships. There was 866 junior lifeguards and professional adult lifeguards that participated. And then at the national championships, there was 44 agencies with over 1,000 junior and professional lifeguards competing in those activities. There's a long list of people that succeeded in your report, but I'm just going to highlight a couple. The Junior Lifeguard Program finished 9th overall at the state championships, and at the national championships we finished 11th overall, so that's a great recognition of our program. Specifically, standout performances from our C group, which is our youngest kids, 9 to 11. They took home 14 medals, and that team was made up of Charlotte Nuschel, Lucy Watson, and Josie Drabick. And then also significant achievements both for Roman Higgins, who was selected to the under-19 national team. Unfortunately, they will not be competing where are they competing this year? In Rome, Italy, and Ramon, Italy, sorry, because they're not actually sending a team there. And then Zane Booth, who's one of our camp program participants who started as a junior lifeguard as the camp director this summer, was selected to the senior team, and he will be traveling to Ricone, Italy to compete in the National Lifeguard Championships representing the United States and Santa Barbara. So I just want to recognize those individuals for all their accomplishments this year. It's not uncommon to have these individuals compete year over year and continue to represent Santa Barbara as a community and the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pretty impressive read, this. It was really, it's great. It's great. It's, you know, it's a tribute to all of these young adults and kids for the work they're putting in and the enthusiasm, but it's also a tribute to the program itself and the work that you all are putting in to make this happen. So, you know, well done all across the board. Thank you. Okay. I think, is that it? Wow, okay. Then we will move on to, and I feel very comfortable swimming. Move on to summer camp.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, with this presentation, we have the opportunity to introduce the commission to Erin Blasey, who has joined our team as the new marketing coordinator, and she will be doing the presentation along with Rich Hanna. Thank you.
Welcome.
Chair and Commissioners, thank you. So first, we'll start with programming. What did we offer in 2022? In 2022, the Parks and Recreation Department brought back 18 different camp options. When deciding which camps we are going to offer each year, we look at which programs have been successful in the past and which programs are already being offered by other providers. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. We want to ensure that we're providing unique and valued opportunities to families by filling gaps in existing programming and local offerings rather than duplicating other programs. This year, the department's summer camp offerings covered a diverse range of themes and activities, including water skills and safety, engineering, sports, crafts, and business development. Of the 18 camps offered this year, 4 were run by the department: skate camp, nature camp, junior lifeguards, and summer fun. The remaining 14 were run by local contractors. Partnering with local contractors allows us to find local groups with specialized expertise and proven business models. And this allows us to provide the community with a broader range of camp offerings led by qualified professionals. So marketing, how did we promote these offerings? Planning for the 2022 Summer Camp Marketing Campaign began with my predecessor in fall 2021, with the campaign officially launching in February and then spanning the entire camp season. The department leveraged a mixture of paid and earned media across print, broadcast, and digital channels. In the examples here, you can see 2 of our ads placed in local publications to promote the opening of registration. An example of a Camp Spotlight social post that was shared to our social media channels throughout the summer, as well as some earned coverage on KEYT highlighting our programs. Many of our contractors are also really helpful in promoting our camps throughout the marketing cycle. And something special we did this year was coordinating content capture of many of our camps so we can have compelling photos to use in future camp marketing campaigns, and you'll get to see some of those photos in this presentation. So how did it go? Last year, we saw a really substantial spike in registrations as we were one of the only summer camp providers serving the community in 2021. This year, as the pandemic slowed and more providers returned to their summer programming, it created a larger pool of options for the community to choose from. However, this increased competition resulted in only an 11% reduction in our registrations and was still an increase from our pre-pandemic levels. Overall, Parks and Recreation Summer Camp served almost 3,000 individual participants and provided over 3.3 million hours of childcare for our community in 2022. And while the department works very hard to keep prices of summer camps at an affordable per hour rate, we're always looking for ways to increase access to our programming for lower income families. The department, in partnership with SB PAL and the Park Foundation, offers summer camp scholarships each year so children can enjoy a high quality summer camp experience at either no cost or a greatly reduced cost. This year, 151 scholarships were awarded, covering over $500,000 in camp fees. We are also really proud to offer Summer Fun, which is a department-run camp, offering families 9 weeks of full-day childcare with a one-time fee of $25. In 2002, we offered this program at 2 sites, both Franklin Elementary and Washington Elementary, so we could serve both the west side and the east side. Summer Fun this year served 493 participants and provided development opportunities for 32 junior counselors. So how do we know it was a successful summer? Beyond just tracking registrations year over year, we really want to ensure that we're offering the best summer experience for the community. So we, after each camp session, will send out a survey to all registrants to learn more about their experience in our camps. From that survey, we learned that 93% of registrants would be likely or extremely likely to recommend a department summer camp to their friends and family. With that, we also include a question, an open-ended question, so we can seek additional feedback from registrants in their own words. It was a pleasure for me to get to read through the testimonials of our camps and see them firsthand, and I'm really excited to share both the photos and some of these testimonials with you. So skate camp, my son was hesitant to even start skating, and by the end of camp, the counselors had him going down every ramp in the park. This was a great experience for him. Lobster Joe's Beach Camp, we're really proud that this one was actually nominated for Best Summer Camp this year in the Santa Barbara Independence Best of campaign. These people rocked it, super energetic and engaging. My kid loved it. And ceramics camp. This was our second summer doing ceramics, and my daughter absolutely loved it. There is a certain hard-to-explain zen and sense of peace that artistic expression fosters in the kids. Your clay camp has this nailed. Special place, special materials, special people. Trapeze camp. Top-notch experience. From the first day to the last day, the coaches were high energy and positive, very organized, and my daughter loved every minute of the camp. She felt safe, encouraged, and learned a ton. We plan to sign up for this camp again. She would go all summer if she could. And Santa Barbara Junior Lifeguards, as we mentioned, we're very proud of this program. This testimonial, Junior Lifeguards is a quintessential summer experience for any kid growing up in coastal California. Along with teaching water safety and getting to know the ocean on an up-close and personal level, you can't beat the physical development that comes along with all of the activity involved. The City of Santa Barbara Junior Lifeguard Program gets 2 thumbs up from this family, unquestionably. And then a really exciting year for junior lifeguards, in addition to what Mr. Hanna had already shared. 2002, we were able to bring back our annual Junior Lifeguards Fiesta competition. This was the first time since 2019. The department hosted 15 agencies with over 1,500 youth participants. And I am very fortunate to be here and provide just a glimpse into the hard work that goes into the summer programming. I really want to acknowledge all of the team that makes this happen, from permanent staff to hourly staff to our contractors. And this photo here is just a handful of the staff that make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I was about to say, just before you did that, that I really feel like we ought to be applauding. That's, thank you. Yeah, I mean, really well done. Yes.
So I had kids that went through for the last couple of years, and they love it. My son surfs now because of the surf camp, which is good. Website registration, though, can we talk about that? Yeah.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Hernando Labarge, yes, how do I say this? We had a critical failure. I'll acknowledge it. It was with our software provider on camp registration day. We're already looking at a couple of options. We have had a smaller issue the previous year, which required us to move junior lifeguards outside of the regular camp offerings. That worked well, so what we're thinking of for 2023, and I don't have all the details, is we would do junior lifeguards, the most popular camps that create the most amount of traffic to the site that causes all the issues, and then open up all camp registration. So it'd be kind of a 3-day process. We're also looking at other options, potentially like lotteries, where families can register ahead of time when it's convenient, and then we do a lottery, but we know people don't like that because they can't plan for their summer. But we recognize that the software provider needs to do a better job, and we'll be coming out with more information as we do our registration for 2023.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Just for Aaron, are you responsible for all those fun new Instagram posts I see on the Parks and Rec page?
Well, thank you. Chair and Commissioners, thank you. Yes, that is me.
I was wondering who it was, so thanks. It's fun to look at every day.
Thank you.
I have a stupid question. What's earned coverage versus the other coverage?
Chair and Commissioners, that is not a stupid question. So earned coverage is, well, I'll start with paid coverage or paid media is when you are partnering with different organizations or media sources and you're paying. So you're placing an ad in a newspaper or a magazine or on TV. Earned media is when people are excited about what you're doing and they want to share it with the community.
Okay, great, thanks. I wonder what, it's like, I couldn't logic through it, I couldn't get there, so thank you.
I think we used to call that word of mouth.
Yeah, okay, this is via John Palmentary, yeah. Good job, yeah, great job. Commissioner Lesnar Buxton.
I would to say thank you, and I hate to bring this up, but one of my friends is concerned about the lack of public access to the park during trapeze cap, and if there's any way to balance the needs of the private agency and the residents in the area that would be suffering worth looking into. Again, I hate to bring this up, but she bugs me every time we see each other, so I thought I would ask.
Yeah, We all have one of those.
So, Chair McGill, Commissioner Lesnar Buxton, if I could repeat what you're asking about, it has to do with Plaza Veracruz, where we have the Santa Barbara Trapeze operating, and the opportunity for the public just to use the park, to drop in and use the park. We did open a portion of the park a year ago, I think at the end of last summer, so that there was always public access outside of that trapeze area. And it may be that your friend doesn't know that, so we could do a better job of advertising it. And then we will be, over the course of the next year or so, sort of looking at our long-term options for that park. So Santa Barbara Trapeze is in there. It was a great solution to some issues that we had there, and particularly during the pandemic. But we will be bringing forward a park planning initiative at some point in the future to sort of look at the long-term opportunity for that park. That helps.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you.
I have a question on that.
Sure.
Is it the same entrance?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, the same entrance for the future?
No, currently, if you want to use the other park.
Sure, Commissioner Aldana, so the entrance is off the alley, which is part of the park, surprisingly. Most people don't know that. And then I do know the trapeze folks often, welcome people to come in and watch the trapeze from the area that we have them using for people participating in their programs. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, great. Anyways, congratulations on yet another fabulous, successful summer. Yeah, there we go.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, I would also like to add, I try not to do this, but if you look at the chart or remember what we had in 2020, 2021, and 2022, we were the only provider in 2020 as well. And the recreation staff and the park staff that also supported them we really tried to help the community all through the pandemic. And our use of and love of our park and open spaces was tremendous, which is great, as you know. And then when we had a huge year last year, again, it was a similar situation. Many providers were really concerned about all the requirements you had to have, really to keep your campers and your participants safe. The fact that it's gone down a little bit this year is actually okay with us, because there is that sweet spot for where you have what your staff can handle, what your contractors can handle, what your park spaces can handle. So we're actually pleased that other providers are also coming forward and broadening the opportunities for youth throughout the community. We do not need to be the only game in town, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, that makes huge amounts of sense for all the reasons you said. Thanks. Okay, I think we have two big ones coming up, so shall we move along? We are back with the Arts and Crafts Show program. It's been a while.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, well, I won't say any more. You have a presentation before you.
Here we are. And this is an action item, correct? Yes. And basically, the action that you will be asking us for is to concur with the recommendations at the end of the presentation. Is that also correct?
Chair McGill and Commissioners, we've been providing you a report on the work that's been done by staff and the committee, the Arts and Crafts Show Committee, for the past year and a half now. The commission had a pretty big discussion. We included the staff report from that meeting, just as a reminder. And we are in a position that we want to move forward to the ordinance committee with some changes to the ordinance. A number of program adjustments have been made, which happen at the administrative level and in collaboration with the committee.
Okay.
Okay, Chair McGill and Commissioners, my name is Jason Bryan, Recreation supervisor, senior recreation supervisor, and it's a pleasure to bring back this topic to you that was presented in January of last year. We've done quite a bit of work. The Santa Barbara Arts and Crafts Show has been a tradition since 1965. The show has changed many times over its years, from a dozen artists showing in front of this building in De La Guerra Plaza to the thriving marketplace it is today along Cabrillo Boulevard. Today's presentation will follow the format in your written report. This policy review began with a presentation last year on January 27th and was the focus of many advisory committee meetings for nearly a year and a half. That included the majority of our regular meetings and 2 special meetings and 5 ad hoc meetings, so lots of meetings. We'll review the milestones achieved by staff working with the advisory committee. And the next step in this process is that municipal code change, which we'll go into a little bit more later in the presentation. This was a significant project. Staff worked with show members in the advisory committee on these 5 major topic areas that were identified in last year's commission report. We'll review each of these areas and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have in the process or the overall outcomes. Starting with integrating the arts and crafts sections. The show was segregated into separate arts and crafts sections from the time the crafts were invited to join the program in 1971. And that segregation continued until the show was shut down in March 2020 due to COVID. There were numerous requests from the crafts members to integrate over the decades, but it never kind of got to the finish line. When the show was able to resume in October 2020, it was about a third of its regular size, and it allowed us the opportunity to kind of temporarily run it as an integrated show and test the waters. This allowed us to really look at how it would work, and it worked surprisingly well. Feedback was positive from most members who participated in that integrated format. The advisory committee reviewed another request for integration and ultimately supported a process for integration through attrition where existing members were able to retain their spaces and open spaces could be assigned regardless to prior section assignment. The January 2022 quarterly space assignment meeting was the first where members were placed solely on the basis of attendance and seniority and not whether they are functional, creating functional items or decorative fine arts. Before integration, craft members could sell decorative fine arts, but arts members could not sell functional items. And one of the other outcomes of this is your traditional artists, your painters, sculptors, now they can also sell functional items. We haven't seen a lot of that in the show, but it does open up an opportunity for them. The committee reviewed sections of the procedures and regulations to update some outdated language, and there were 2 kind of major topic areas that we looked at. One was allowing prints for traditional mediums, and then the other was to consider expanding the members beyond Santa Barbara County. The show previously allowed prints, but only for photography. Members working with paint on canvas or other traditional mediums, they were not allowed to sell prints, and it was a little bit of an unequal playing field because there's a lot of economy of scale and opportunity for people who are selling prints. The committee approved prints for all mediums through this process as long as all members produce the prints using their own equipment, and that's one of the tenets of the show is everyone is personally creating everything that's sold there and not farming things out to partner agencies or other businesses. The second half of this is the committee did consider expanding membership beyond Santa Barbara County, but ultimately and overwhelmingly suggested that the membership continue to be restricted to Santa Barbara County residents to keep it kind of grassroots and a local tradition for Santa Barbara. The show considered changes to the advisory committee. Staff suggested commission appointment to match the way that many of the other advisory groups operate, but members wanted to see the representatives selected by election, which has always been the case for the show. Without show sections through integration, it kind of created a little bit of a question on how do we now form the advisory committee. The group discussed ways to ensure a balance of interest on the committee and ultimately recommended a system where 2 of the 4 elected members are primarily what would have been considered arts and 2 primarily what would have been considered crafts, so you have representation from kind of both sides of it. There's also a member-at-large position appointed by the commission by someone outside the show, but that position has been vacant for much of the show's history. So most of the time we operate with just the 4 elected advisory committee members. Terms were increased from 18 months to 2 years, and the committee's chairperson was increased from 6 months to 1 year to reduce the frequency of elections and increase the committee's productivity by making fewer leadership changes. 18-month terms were unusually short for other advisory groups, and 6 months term for a chair is quite rare. With approval from the advisory committee, the city established a system for allowing online voting for elections, in addition to the traditional paper ballots that we'll continue to support for anyone who wants that. The July 2022 election resulted in an impressive 62% of show members participating in that election. I think I would love to see online elections expanding in access. One of the other recommendations from the commission from that January 2021 meeting was to explore ways to diversify use of the waterfront on show days. Previously, other events were not even considered if they had any impact on the arts and crafts show, and we wanted to try to, this is our front yard, and try to maximize the use of that in a way that's compatible with the show. A system was developed that allowed coordination of other events that were compatible with the show in a way that's intended to expand opportunities and expand both groups. The first test case that we did was the 2021 Santa Barbara Half Marathon that coordinated well with minimal impact to the show. The Children's Fiesta Parade, and more recently the Pacific Pride Festival are 2 other examples of successful coordination between events in the waterfront area. Staff has already started working with the committee to coordinate this year's Santa Barbara Half Marathon coming up in November. One of the policy topics that required several meetings to review was the violation procedure. The department's standard code of conduct was used as a foundation for the show's new policies. Similar to the department's standard enforcement procedure, the show approached violations in 3 categories. Minor violations, these are usually simple misunderstandings of rules or staff instructions. In the majority of cases, the member complies with the rules or instructions and the matter is considered resolved without further action. If the member does not comply, it would result in a 1-week suspension and would be reviewed by the advisory committee. Major violations. These could be more confrontational behavior towards staff or others, or repetitive occurrences. In these situations, the member would be asked to immediately leave the show and a special for that day, and a special meeting would be scheduled by the advisory committee where they would provide a penalty recommendation to the Parks and Recreation manager. The manager will determine the penalty after considering the committee's recommendation. And then in the most egregious cases, the extreme violation, this could include fighting, extremely confrontational behavior, breaking laws. In these situations, management would step in to immediately determine an appropriate penalty so that it doesn't fester. And in all of these cases, suspensions or expulsions can be appealed to the Parks and Recreation Director. That's similar to the department's standard practice. Some members were concerned that all final decisions were being made by staff, so the department is requesting that members continue to have the ability to appeal the director's decisions to the commission. This has been the past practice and was part of the municipal code for decades. Unlike past practice, we're recommending that the commission's decision be final and cannot be appealed further to City Council. And actually, we're not aware of any past violation procedure that went all the way to City Council. I think it always ended with commission, and I've talked to several members that have been in the show from the 70s and 80s, and they all have the same recollection. So I think that makes sense in this case. And that brings us to Municipal Code Chapter 15.08. Although it doesn't go into a great detail on operational guidance, these are some of the things that are included on that section. How the advisory committee is formed, terms and conditions for exhibits and exhibitors, the county residency requirement, application process, payment of fees, and conditions for revoking the permit, which would be part of that violation procedure. The show's procedures and regulations go into much more granular detail on how the show the show's day-to-day operation is administered. Chapter 15.08 of the Municipal Code has been reviewed by the City Attorney's Office with many updates to titles and general language. Proposed revisions include a lot of out-of-date information. It referred to this recreation superintendent, a position that hasn't existed for quite some time. And then just general language changes, just bringing it up to code and you know, what would be appropriate if the code was entered in today. We're making a couple changes. One is to allow rain-out makeups. That's actually been in practice since 2015, but the municipal code really doesn't match that. So this is bringing that kind of in alignment with our current operations. Another thing that it will do, and this will be addressed later on another initiative separate from the 15.08, is prohibiting vending from vehicles adjacent to the show. Right now, there's no effective way that we could stop someone from just parking their vehicle and doing any commerce right in front of the show. That's not really fair to the show members, and we've received quite a few complaints when that has happened. So this allows the city to regulate that just on show days and just on the ocean side of Cabrillo Boulevard on the footprint of the show. The other change that we have is increasing those terms, as we talked about, from 18 months to 2 years, and formalizing the new suspension or an appeals process where the commission, this body, would have the final determination on appeals. Now, these aren't the only topics the staff have been working with the advisory committee on, but these are the main ones that came up from that review from January 2021. Recent accomplishments outside of this have been creating a time off system for members with seniority, so they can take some Sundays off and still compete for really premium spaces at space assignment meetings. The group has been working on ways of reducing gaps in the show that are very detrimental to people who are beyond those gaps. It's tourist surface tension, I call it. So you need to have this continual line to draw people down to the east end of the show. And then another project is creating a lottery-based system for the weekly space assignments when we have open spaces. Of course, people with assigned spaces will always have the rights to their assigned spaces, but we've been using an online tool for assigning those few open spots, and it's not quite fair, and we're trying to fine-tune that and make a better system. But what we have now is worlds better than what we've had before, and we hope to continue to make improvements on that. And that basically concludes my presentation. The things that we're asking for are for the commission to, those municipal code changes, if you're comfortable with the language and you have those as an attachment in your packet, that we would forward this to, it would first go to the ordinance commission, and from there it would go to city council for adoption. Are there any questions or comments?
Does anybody have any questions? I see
do.
Commissioner Longstreet.
As I go over 1508, with what we're doing, trying to broaden the uses down at the waterfront, in the times, dates, and locations B, where it says Saturday during Fiesta Week, should that be there if we're going to be having the children's parade at that time, or should we remove that and just have the Sunday show?
Chair McGill and Commissioner Longstreet, this year was the first time that we've done this in many, many years, having the Fiesta parades on Cabrillo Boulevard, and it works surprisingly well. The footprint of the show on a Saturday holiday typically runs from State Street to Garden Street. Sometimes it goes a little bit beyond that. And the way that the Children's Fiesta Parade was staged this year, the staging started past that point. So both events actually were very compatible and very successful this year. So I don't think there's a need to separate that and to take that out, because I think it worked really well.
Okay. Because I'm thinking of the long term of, this being an ordinance. It was interesting to read through this. The show can happen any place on Cabrillo Boulevard. So there are times it could maybe move around. Is that correct? Like it could be at Plaza Del Mar if you wanted to offer a Saturday there.
I believe in the reading of this that that's a potential, although I think the intention is to keep it within its footprint and to work with compatible events and try to increase programming in the waterfront. But that does appear to be a potential.
Yeah, because as I look at our arts and crafts show and the benefits of it for our community, you know, I would hope at some point we would see them be amenable to having a downtown day, if we're going to have a downtown promenade, where, you know, it opens it up and it's a benefit to them and a benefit to the entire community to have an event downtown. So that's kind of where my thinking is on that, is to just being open to having different venues. I know it's tradition down there, and we hold our Sundays sacrosanct. And my one question to you is it an issue having two arts and crafts, or two arts and two crafts, having that even number for a vote, since we don't have the fifth, you know, that fifth person?
Well, we are actually looking at this as kind of a step. In developing the municipal code changes, we actually did not reference that at all, because, as I said earlier, the procedures and regulations are much more granular. And when the integration was discussed, the advisory committee, they even discussed that, you know, this is a good step. Let's do this for now. But multiple members envisioned a time when perhaps that goes away because it is an integrated show, one show. But to make people feel comfortable and to gradually kind of go into this new realm of integration, it made them feel more comfortable, and it works. But I don't think it needs to be here forever, and the municipal code allows us to move beyond that if that time comes.
And as a comment, I did walk the show a few weeks ago, and I think the integration is wonderful. I think it makes the show more vibrant and interesting, and I think it was a great move and got me farther down the show. So it got me all the way to the end. So I would give that a thumbs up. So thank you, and good job in getting through all this.
Chair McGill and Commissioner Longstreet, if I could just add, the 2, 2, and 1 gives you odd.
Right.
If you had 5, then the question would be, who gets the third seat? So
I didn't
think-
have a solution. I just asked if it was a problem.
So you're right. When you have an even number showing up, then you could more easily have a split vote. I think we're hoping that through this work effort with the advisory committee, and I really do want to commend Jason, Bryan, and Rich Hanna for their work on this, because 21 meetings, that's not 21 one-hour meetings. So you could probably say it was in excess of 100 hours of meetings, and as well as the staff work that went around it, and also committee member work, of course, people participating in those meetings and or being on the advisory committee. Our goal is that the show itself continues to build on the success we think we see it experiencing now through these changes. There's been some rough spots for various reasons, and it may be that we get to a point where the advisory committee membership, we somehow figure out how to come up with that odd number without there being concern of influence of one, either the arts or the crafts.
And lastly, in all my years, we've only had 2 hearings that I recall here for issues at the Arts and Crafts Show, and neither of them needed to go beyond here, because it was truly personality issues, and there just had to be a decision. It was not solvable. I mean, we weren't going to change people. But 2 and 25 years, I think the code of conduct and all of that is just fine. Thank you. Thanks. Any?
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Yes, my hat's off to commend you for all the efforts and participation into those meetings to get the group to come up with where the guidelines are. Couple questions with regards to the fifth person. it seemed to me from when I sat and observed some of the meetings that the focus is very much on the artist and a little bit less on the patrons. And with that at-large position being unfilled, what about not an arts person, not a crafts person, but a patron who might be interested in participating and wouldn't have a slant on either way?
Chair McGill, Commissioner Hernando LaBerge, that is actually the intention. That fifth person, the at-large, they cannot be a show member, and that was the idea was to bring that voice outside the show, a patron, someone who loves the waterfront, to have their opinion as part of the decision-making process. So that is entirely the intention behind that, and it just has been a difficult position to fill. It's had advertisements or announcements on the website for as long as I've been working with the show, and I've had it filled by one person on 2 terms, and that's the only time that I've seen it. And one thing I would like to say is, although there was quite a bit of staff time involved in this, there was an incredible commitment from the advisory committee and the show members themselves. They're very passionate, and we may not have seen eye to eye on all topics, all times, but I think we got to a general area of consensus on most items, but there was a lot of work from the show members, and especially the sitting advisory committee members that I would like to acknowledge.
And my second question that I know is a hot topic for them has to do with, I think something you alluded to, and I'm not sure if that is covered with this proposed amendment, the vendors that park along there. And you're using the term in a general sense of they cannot sell from any vehicles that are parked on the curb. How does that apply to the food vendors? Because I know that they've got their pros and cons about that, but
Actually, Commissioner McGill and committee, or Chair McGill and commissioners, there are actually 2 different regulations the way that the laws are written, and commerce out of vehicles is a very distinct and separate thing that has to be regulated in one way. There's already a sidewalk vending ordinance that went into effect, I believe it's April. I think we're in a 1-year educational period where there's no enforcement per city council directions. But there are 2 very distinct areas that have to be managed in different ways. So the sidewalk vending ordinance includes a buffer zone of 500 feet around the show. That sidewalk vending could not take place. But again, we're still in an educational period right now. And this part that's in the municipal code is specific to commerce out of vehicles, which cannot be covered by that same ordinance. So it's an interesting distinction, but the city attorney's office were the ones who helped give the guidance and set this path on both of these cases.
and how do the food trucks play into that?
The food trucks is commerce out of vehicles, so that would be addressed here. And then there is a food truck or commerce from vehicles ordinance that I believe was started in 2019 that lost some momentum and is going to be citywide brought back to Ordinance Commission and City Council. But this allows us to move forward now and not waiting for, because 2019 to 2022 is quite a long time. This can allow some protections for now until that new ordinance might be created.
So that means no food trucks.
It would mean no food trucks, or that we can regulate food trucks, yes.
Great, good, thanks. Anything else? I mean, I guess I'd say congratulations and thank you very much. I remember the January session greatly, and that was quite an energetic session. The proposed enforcement changes, the biggest change, is that the appeal to commission?
Chair McGill, there are actually quite a few changes in the enforcement procedure. The previous procedures were very challenging to operate and manage. For instance, the first offense, it doesn't matter how egregious, you can go and punch someone. The existing rules meant that I can just give a warning. I had to send a certified letter to the person. It was a very long process. I've sent certified letters a few times. People never signed for them because they knew it was coming. So this is standardizing, bringing it into something that we think is much more reasonable. But after listening to the, some concerns from show members, we're still building in that appeal process, and that was one of the major concerns they had, and I think that makes sense, and I think that's something that you've done before. I actually do remember 3 hearings in my time with the show, where the commission did concur with staff recommendations on those ones, but it was an opportunity for an outside group to consider the circumstances and consider those appeals.
Thanks. I mean, that was a very emotive part of the discussion, and I think at the time, those of us who were there were very strong in support of, having consistent department standards, and I'm glad you've gotten to where you've gotten. Thanks. I am ready for a motion if you all are ready for a motion. So, oh, yes, no. Do we have any, there's obviously no one here. Do we have any comments?
Anyone who would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom control panel.
Nope. Okay, that's a tribute in itself. Oh, we have one. Okay, great.
We do have one. Nicole Horston. Give me a minute to unmute her.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, allowed to talk. There, she's unmuting herself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Hi, this is Nicole Horston. I am a member of the Cyber Arts and Crafts Show Committee, and we've exhausted our efforts on trying to discuss all these issues, and we've pretty much been pretty unanimous, all 4 of us, to go ahead with these changes, and we feel like you have our blessing on all these changes.
Tammy, well, thank you very much, and thank you for taking the time to call in.
Okay, I would make a motion that we recommend to the ordinance committee that the department proceed with advancing the changes to the municipal code 15.08.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Going once, going twice. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. Congratulations. All right, we have a request for a 2-minute break, so we will take a as quick as possible break, because we have a recess, so we'll take 5 minutes, and we have one more agenda item, major agenda item. The meeting is resumed, and we have one more big agenda item, and that is the financial review. And I believe, Director Zachary, that will be over to you.
Chair McGill and Commissioners, we provided this presentation to the Finance Committee on September 13th as part of the city's initiative to look for ways to increase its fiscal sustainability. 3 departments were asked to make presentations to Finance Committee, Community Development, Parks and Recreation, and Library, following a certain format. Chair McGill was at that meeting and requested that we provide the Commission with the same presentation. I have a lot of information. I am not going to read every word on the slide, so never fear. But this will set a stage. I think it will help the Commission as we begin looking at our next 2-year financial plan, which we will be doing, and as well as give the Commission a sense of some of the interest of the Finance Committee related to the city organization. So to begin, I'm following certain slides, the presentation outline, talking about our mission, reviewing the finances of each of our funds, both our programs and services and how they're funded. Discuss a few of our operational challenges and opportunities, and then there are some recommendations for further consideration. So to begin, as the Commission is very well aware, we have a very broad mandate. Parks and Recreation is probably the most diverse forward-facing department in the city in terms of who we touch on a daily basis and where we are. We have an amazing mission related to keeping our parks clean and safe. We've got beaches and recreation facilities. We promote recreation, we enhance beauty, we promote stewardship, we provide cultural experiences. We are really integral to many generations and many residents in the city of Santa Barbara. When you look at our resources, that tells the story as well. We have 60 parks and sports facilities, 22 playgrounds. We have tennis and pickleball courts. When you look at where they're dispersed throughout the community, some are community parks, some are little neighborhood parks. We've got 1,200 acres of open space parks. We operate a municipal golf course. We have sports facilities and community gardens and 6 miles of beaches. Pretty diverse. The Commission is very well aware of this. When we look at our street trees, you know, a good count is 25,000. I think we probably have at least 8,000 vacant spots. So we think about it over time, filling those in. And then trees in our developed and undeveloped parks exceed almost 40,000, if not more. When you look at our organization chart, we have 17 different programs. So our budget is organized into 17 different buckets. Our full-time equivalents department-wide is basically 91. We are about 20% smaller than we were prior to the recession, just as a sense, and that's the general fund portion of the department. We're organized in a number of divisions, and you can get the sense of how they are. And then also we have our commissions and our committees. When we look at the staffing by division of those 17 programs, the 4 different funds, it includes the general fund, the miscellaneous grants fund, which does not have any staff in it, Creeks Fund, and the Golf Fund. Most of this presentation, actually 98% of it's focused on the general fund because that's what the Finance Committee and Council are focusing on. The distribution of staff shows really where it lies. Recreation permanent staff is just under 26 staff, but we also have 94,000 hourly hours that are allocated in this year's budget for the staff that support our summer programs, our after-school programs, our monitors in our parks. So when you divide that by 2080, you're looking at another 47 equivalent staff, although it's quite a few more. We have 6 vacancies currently in our department. And we have this great opportunity of presenting the commission the 5, 10, 15, 25-year achievements. Over 50% of our department and our general fund has turned over in the last 3 years. So the people that you are hearing about are those that are here in longevity. So we've also had tremendous turnover. We're not alone. Organizations are experiencing it everywhere, but it does speak to the fact that we have a whole new generation of staff that are learning and exploring and hopefully staying with us. We still have 6 vacancies, but our budget and allows us to fill those vacancies, and we hopefully will have them all done by early 2023. When we look at the expenditures by division, recreation being the largest, followed by parks, then Creeks, golf, and then lastly administration. I'll dig in a little bit more on this, but just under $30 million when you look at all the funds. When you just look at so when you go back to this slide, so of this slide, 29.7 million is the entire department. Of that, 21 million is our general fund budget. One of the key considerations in building our general fund budget every year is what is the amount of what the finance department calls the subsidies. So the amount of general tax revenue that gets allocated to Parks and Recreation on an annual basis. And for 23, it's just under $14 million. It shows that we are the 3rd largest general fund subsidized department relative to other departments in the city, with the 2 larger ones being police and fire, followed by community development and finance committee and so on. What's unique about our department is that of that $13.8 million, a good chunk of it goes out to actually pay for services and programs in other departments. That's what we call our allocated costs. Because we have so many properties, programs, facilities, there are staff in IT, there are staff in motor pool, there are staff in facilities. That cost of those staff that are providing internal services get allocated to our budget. So it's not fun. Those aren't funds we decide how to spend. They're just allocated based on a formula. One of the questions that the Finance Committee wanted to look at is how do we rate in terms of revenues related to expenditures? So it gives, this slide shows over the last 6 years the amount of the adopted general fund budget in blue and then the budgeted revenues in green. And as you can see, 2018, 2019 were pretty similar. Even 2020, which was the onset of the pandemic, wasn't terrible. And then when we got to 2021, we saw a bit of an uptick and then a downtick in 22, and now we're showing that we're projecting 7.64 million in revenue for our new budget. And when we presented our budget to the commission, we talked about how we were finding ways to generate more revenue to support our programs and services. When we look at the trends over time, you can see a little bit of what happened between what was budgeted versus what was actual. And again, we essentially are pretty consistent with the exception of the 2 pandemic years where our revenues declined dramatically as a result of all of our facilities being closed. Despite the best efforts of staff, and they really did go to all ends to provide services, we did suffer the loss. The city suffered a loss. But then we bounced back in 22. When we look at our subsidy trends, this gives a picture of what was budgeted versus what was actually expended and shows a slow increase over time, not dramatic, a bigger jump up in 2023, and that really speaks to both the increase in allocations out to other departments, but also salaries and benefits. And that's one of the key considerations of council and the city organization is our costs are going to continue to increase, whether it's staffing on an annual basis or our PERS costs, so our retirement costs. Looking at how our subsidy is allocated by division, the Parks Division has the largest amount, followed by Recreation, and then Administration. But I would point out that's partly because almost all of the revenue that the department generates is shown in our recreation budgets. But if we didn't have a park, you couldn't have a sports game. So within our Parks Division budget is the cost to maintain the actual facility, the Parks facility, and within Recreation, the revenue gets allocated from the activities that are there, with some exceptions, because we also have our facilities such as Los Baños, where the maintenance of that facility is housed in the aquatics program. When we look at our expenditures by division, again, Recreation and Parks making up the bulk of the organization, Administration a small amount. And then when we look at expenditures by category, so that's the pie chart on the right, and the pie chart on the right tells a story that will tell you a little bit more about it, but just under 60% of our annual budget is for salaries and benefits. In other departments, it's as much as 80. So ours is slightly different for two reasons. One, we have just over $4 million of allocated costs. So that's money that goes into other departmental budgets for the staff and programs there. And our supplies and services is pretty significant as well. When we look at allocated costs, this gives the commission a picture of what that is. So planned and building and planned maintenance is facilities, public works. Motor pool is the maintenance of the vehicles. And then if you also look, IT, custodial, just under $600,000 a year in custodial. We also get allocated insurance costs and then utilities costs. Of our allocated costs, they're about 19% of our expenditures, but represent 30% of the subsidy. So when we're generating revenue, we're partly generating revenue to cover costs that are allocated to the department. If you took this out, our adjusted subsidy that goes directly just to the staff and the services we provide, it's $9.7 million. That said, we can't provide all of those services without the internal support of other city departments. So there's a number of ways of looking at it. When we look at our supplies and services line item, they represent 19% of our expenditures and 29% of our subsidy. Of those expenses, for just over $4 million, 18% of it goes to pay for water. So just like everybody else that has a water meter, we have lots and lots of water meters, and we pay for every drop of water that gets applied anywhere in a facility or a park. And of that expense, 45% is just for the meter alone. So when you pay for the meter, you pay for the water delivery, you pay for the water discharge. When you look at this too, I want to point out non-contractual services represent more than 50% of our supplies and services expenses. Of that, almost all of it goes out to service contracts. So we talk about those 14 contractors that provide camps in the summertime. We bring in that revenue and then we send it back out to them. So anybody that signs up for that camp, the revenue will come into the city. The city has an agreement, percentage agreement, depending on the contractual agreement, and then it goes back out to the contractor to pay the contractor for the service that they provide. It gives you a sense of why it's so large. It's not that we're out there buying a bunch of stuff. And what's really important to also point out is we only have 1/4 of these funds for all of our vehicle fuel, our tools, our own janitorial costs, because we maintain all of our restrooms. The custodial costs you see and allocated is not for that. It's for buildings. It's not for park restrooms. Landscape and facility repairs. Just quickly to go through our divisions, we were asked to go through each of our major program areas, talk about our programs and services, and our sources of funding. So administration has a small amount of funding. That's where our capital project staff are housed. And so we charge back to our capital projects a small amount each year. We sometimes also are able to charge back to grants and/or any other project that we have where outside funding comes in, but we don't budget for that on an annual basis because we're never entirely sure what we do. So the admin division basically provides overall administrative direction and support to all of our divisions. We oversee our financial business throughout the department. We have our Parks and Recreation Commission that we are responsible for making sure that you're able to meet and give us advice. And we also focus a lot on our policy and master planning projects as well as community partnerships to leverage our resources. We also provide the administration for the Park Foundation. The Park Foundation does not have any staff, so we do that internally as well. And then other aspects of the division that you're familiar with relates to our capital projects. We have a team of staff that really are instrumental in advancing so many of our park and recreation renovation projects. Some of the things that we've done, which is really to point out how the administration's division supports the entire department in terms of our ability to reinvest in facilities. These are examples of projects that we've done over the course of the last 10 years, which resulted in the investment of just over $7 million. We have 9 playgrounds that were grant funded. We have 7 restrooms that were renovated with grants. We did improvements in 5 community centers. We either built or expanded parks. We've done repairs to beach access stairs. The list really goes on, and what's not reflected in here is that we actually have about $7.5 million pending for new projects that are out there. So we're doing it in an environment where it's actually really competitive because there's not enough money for parks and recreation reinvestment. It's really underfunded everywhere throughout the state and the nation. We were asked to talk about what our mandatory services are. So because of our role as the administration, annual budget development, implementation of our council directives, compliance with all of our reporting requirements, we are also the ones that oversee implementation and compliance with the municipal code and the Parks and Recreation being a charter commission. When we look at Parks and Forestry, again, our Parks Administration is pretty small, but that's where our Park Ranger program is housed, and it represents half of this budget. So we have 4 full-time Park Rangers, we have 2 administrative staff, and they really provide that bulk of administrative oversight and support throughout the Parks Division, as well as throughout the department, as well as also involved in overseeing our integrated pest management program, because we do that for the entire city, not just our department. Planning and open space management plans and projects, contracts for services, and general oversight and park planning. There isn't really any funding in this program. We have a small contract with a school district, $33,000 a year, where we do premise checks in schools on the weekends and after hours. Parks operations, that's the largest part of the Parks Division budget. It looks quite big. But a portion of it's actually related to the service we provide to waterfront in terms of maintaining the parking lot there. We get a small amount of money from other sources, but everything else is generally subsidized by the general fund. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the work that's done in these parks also support the recreation in these parks, and therefore both the opportunity for our community to enjoy our parks for free, which is really our highest priority, but also the opportunity to participate in programs and program sports. So they have a pretty tall order. We have 28 staff that are allocated in this program, but only 20 of them are actually day-to-day field staff. So when you think of what they have to do, whether it has to do with field maintenance, restroom cleaning, repairing and reconstructing park features, we have a very small staff. We have some support through contract maintenance, but really small staff to provide this work. Next one. Beach maintenance, again, we have a small amount of funds to do our raking and grooming on city beaches, and it's entirely funded by the city, by the general fund. There's no revenue really there, except the raking and the grooming that we do, particularly the grooming in the summer months, makes our beaches safe. so that we can have our junior lifeguard program on the beach, so that people can go to the beach and be on the beach and hopefully be less likely to encounter something in the sand that makes it unsafe. Urban forestry, the commission is very familiar with this. Now, this is our program, which is largely focused on street trees, but they do also manage our park trees in our park system. Funding includes tree removal permits, but the largest portion of that funding comes from a transfer utility users tax to support, and that represents 61% of the budget comes from utility users tax, general fund subsidy, the remainder of that amount. And so it's important to note this, because for everything that we do, and largely the focus is on street right-of-way work, this slide shows you the change over time of how the program's been funded. So back in 2010, 83% of the funding for the program came from UUT. All the way up to today, that's dropped to 61%, and the general fund subsidy has grown over time. So the UUT allocation has not grown at the rate that the general fund has had to subsidize in order to make that program whole. Parkways and medians, this is another program that we provide that's not in a park. It's in streets and street right-of-ways. We manage it 13 acres for the entire city. So this is a program that was split between Parks and Recreation and Streets, Public Works for many years, and we ended up taking it over in 2015. So in terms of this program, we have a small amount of funds come from the utility users tax, and then the bulk of it comes from the general fund. We also provide contract services for water resources. So the Sheffield Open Space is actually not zoned Parks and Recreation, but it's part of the project to put the reservoir underground, included creating a wonderful open space in that neighborhood, and we provide the contract services to water resources for its maintenance. So just as a bit of a summary, the breadth of the division responsibilities is pretty significant in terms of 60 parks, all the different assets that they're responsible for, the different types of parks they're responsible for, and then also specifically what our park rangers do. So with those, now that we're fully staffed, if you think about 22,000 service calls and premise checks divided by 4 people on an annual basis, that's pretty significant. In our forestry program alone, and Commission just considered some pretty important topics related to trees, we get 1,100 tree service requests a year. So somebody from forestry is going out in response to a tree service request that's outside whatever the staff are trying to schedule. So they have quite a balancing act to do. And while we love the idea of being able to respond right away, it often has to consider what are the different factors. And some things make them elevate them, as the commission has discussed tonight, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer for that work to occur. So looking again sort of across the board, our expenditures for the division for this year are proposed or projected to be just over $9 million, and of that, 7.2 is subsidy. So again, the revenue doesn't show in this division. Our mandatory services, we have to comply with federal, state, and local human health, accessibility, and worker safety. We have reporting requirements depending on the location. I mentioned the Integrated Pest Management Plan. We're responsible for that. And then there are many other programs and services that we participate in, whether it's land development review, maintaining our trees, compliance with our community wildfire protection plan, being part of our local emergency response. When we get into discretionary services, and this is one of the things we were asked to provide, providing support for community events. We don't budget for it, but it comes at a cost. And there's that balancing act between what the community benefits from for what the city subsidizes. It comes out of our budget. And the revenue does not offset those impacts. Mentioned the park ranger support for the school district. And I just mentioned also customer response-based tree planting, maintenance, and palm frond collection. We get requests all the time for this. And so how do you balance that with trying to actually maintain general operations? Other things that are discretionary, we have people asking us to make improvements in our parks and outside of our normal work areas. We love doing it. We try to do it. Again, it's an additional sort of pull on a resource that may not be planned. By recreation, and again, Recreation Division, the staff are fantastic, just like our park staff. We have a very broad Recreation Division. Oversight is provided through our administration program, and earlier mentioned our partnership agreements. We have 130 co-sponsored partnership and joint use agreements. So much of what happens in our parks is done through these agreements, and they're done in a way that really make it very possible for many different organizations to participate and use our public resources. Also, very key to this program is marketing and design services. So Erin Blasey, being our new marketing coordinator, she is key to helping us market our programs so that we are actually generating the revenue that we need to operate them. Aquatics is one of our largest. When you look at the program, it's about a $2 million program, of which just over half of it comes from revenue. And that revenue really is across many different sources, whether it's summer camps, which is the largest source, pool rentals, adult swim programs, classes, concessions, and then we also get a reimbursement from the Waterfront Department. The Waterfront Department supports half of the cost of our beach guard service every summer. The Park Foundation plays a key role in many of our recreation programs where people can donate funds to the Park Foundation, and they more often than not support programs and services, whether it's helping purchase items or I'm forgetting the word right now, scholarships, any other number of things that can go through park. Where they do a lot, we provide professional lifeguard services. We estimate there's probably 2 million residents and visitors that come into contact or around a lifeguard in any one year that they're responsible for, whether it's in the pool or whether it's on the beach. Looking at youth activities, this program has a budgeted subsidy just under $1 million and our revenue just under $700,000. That revenue largely comes from summer youth programs, some of it from recreation after school, but would also point out that in this program is where we house our summer fun program, which is entirely subsidized by the general fund, with the exception of the $25 registration fee. But this program has been key to so many families. When we talk about the youth serve, it's not just the youth, it's the parents and the siblings and everybody else that gets served. And through this program, and we mentioned, I don't think we mentioned in a summer camp, this is where we facilitate our inclusion programs so that youth and adults with different needs can also participate. We collaborate with many youth-focused agencies because we also rely on them to advance what we're doing. And then we do our best to focus on as much activities that broaden youth experiences. In community services, so this is the West Side Neighborhood Center, Franklin Center, Davis Center, McKenzie, and Ortega Welcome House. A large part of this revenue comes from facility leases. So we provide pretty low-cost lease space to nonprofits, which helps with revenue, but it also is consistent with our mission because these are nonprofits that are serving the community. We also have rentals, our community gardens. We oversee picnic site rentals. And at the same time, we do a lot of free programs, social service and cultural programs for youths, adults, and seniors. We host the Youth Apprentice, Culinary Arts, and Arts Alliance programs. We have food pantry and farmers market every week. And then this is where our youth council is also supported. In active adults, and Jason Bryan was here, he is the key to the Arts and Crafts Show. But the active adults is largely focused around the Career Recreation Center, but also in this program are the Lawn Bowls clubs. And I would point out the Lawn Bowls clubs are kind of self-operating. They don't get direct funding from us. They have fees and memberships, which helps pay for their utilities. They are included in our allocated costs. So if something needs to be painted, the city paints it. So there's certain things about what we do there. But the focus here is a lot of what happens at the Career Recreation Center, whether it's public dance programs, fitness and social programs through a variety of independent contractors, social programs, volunteer social programs for older adults, and as you heard tonight, we also manage the Arts and Crafts Show. Sports, so sports and tennis, I'm going to whiz through these. Our sports program provides sport leagues, and classes, camps, and tournaments for youth, teens, and adults. We have many community partner relationships related to sports and sports programming. They coordinate events that happen in our athletic fields, and gym and beach volleyball courts, and then also coordinate the maintenance of our year-round beach volleyball courts, as well as manage and program Carrillo Street Gym. The funding for this program, as you can see from here, the budgeted revenue exceeds the budgeted subsidy, and that comes from use of our courts and fields, sports leagues, and in particular beach volleyball camp and classes, highly, highly popular. Tennis and pickleball. We used to just say tennis, now we say tennis and pickleball. Again, another program that is really focused around the courts that we have, and permits, court rentals, adult classes, and then to some extent private donations and bequests. And also in this program, a lot of what we do is coordinate with local schools and nonprofits, managing a tennis and pickleball court user fee system to be able to ensure that we actually get some reimbursement for use of our courts. We maintain those courts, we restripe those courts, we do all of those things within that program. And then lastly, facilities and special events. As you can see, the budgeted revenue here is pretty significant. That largely has to do with, this is where all the revenue comes in. For our indoor and outdoor facility reservation services and event coordination, particularly in the beachfront. We also manage citywide permitting and commercial still and video film shoots throughout the city, so that's for all of the city. We have rental operations on the beach, and then the revenue for the restaurant at the Cabrillo Pavilion is also housed in this program. During the pandemic, if I recall correctly, we had 186 different outdoor fitness permits because everybody moved outside. So that's something that these staff coordinate. And really, it's not so much the revenue in this case, it's what they're doing and how much work it involves to do those things. So in summary, we spent a lot of time looking at our data, trying to quantify what has happened in the last year, and one can assume could happen in any one year. We've served almost 5,000 youth through our programs, through adult sports and tennis, just under 32,000, Los Baños, just under 110,000, and other programs, as you can see, as we go through there. And then we calculated the number of hours that someone was able to participate in an activity in a city park or recreation facility. This says nothing to the thousands and thousands of people that just go to a park and play, or go to a park and walk through. These are activities that we are involved in coordinating and managing. Financial summary, again, looking at where we lie in terms of revenue. Where we have a budgeted subsidy of $4.2 million, so that's showing that our revenue is projected to be around $6 million in fiscal year 23, and the revenue largely falling in aquatics, facilities and special events, and then active adults and youth activities. You can see the spread there, where the money comes in. Our mandatory services, just like parks, but even more specifically under facility operations as it relates to public pools, facilities, there's a lot of codes and compliance that we have to have on an annual basis, and staff that monitors that. We don't have others monitor that for us. Accessibility is a key focus of so many things that we do, including inclusion. We have to have health permits for all of our buildings, and compliance with Santa Barbara Health Code. Discretionary services, we subsidize many fee-based programs. There isn't one that isn't, frankly, to any one extent. We've done a lot of analysis on that, which we'll be able to present to the commission at a future meeting, where we figured out what the % subsidy is for our various different programs, whether it's youth, adults, or facility permit fees. We also we support the Santa Barbara Youth Council. Now, that was directed by our former mayor, Harriet Miller, many, many, many years ago. And that's not a charter committee. It's a voluntary community initiative that we do. And we provide a lot of discounted or free facility use fees that relate to activities that people may not be aware related to pony baseball or the Foresters, the tennis patrons, across the board. We do a lot to discount the use of our facilities. And we provide free programs and services, which are near and dear to our heart, which range anywhere from the people of greatest need when it comes to food distribution to the fun stuff like concerts in the park, and then a number of other activities. So briefly, golf, and this is again part of that financial review by the Finance Committee. They asked for, where is golf? And this is a good sort of review. Our budgeted revenue for fiscal year 23 is just under $4 million, and our expenditures are 3.3. This is unheard of for the golf fund, and it's enabling us to reinvest in the golf course in ways that we haven't been able to do before. This gives the commission a sense of how it's changed over time. Our revenue trends, so the light green is our budgeted revenue. The darker green is the actual revenue. So 2018, 19, and 2020, we were below. And then the 2020, interesting enough, that included, I think, 6 weeks of closure due to COVID. And then in 2021, we jumped way ahead. And again, the safe sport, the outdoor sport, people weren't traveling. We sustained it last year, and we're monitoring it closely to see what happens going into the future. We expect it to level off, for sure. But what it has allowed us to do is set aside funds to reinvest in the infrastructure where we really did not have a great investment plan or any funds to actually do anything with them. And then lastly, the Creeks Fund. Creeks has grown dramatically over the years as well. It started out as a projection of $2 million a year 20 years ago. We're now closer to $5 million, and that has in part to do with the cost to stay in a hotel room in Santa Barbara generates more revenue. I think there's also more hotel rooms than there were 20 years ago in Santa Barbara as well, generating that revenue. And Santa Barbara is increasingly a destination for everybody in California. We do not rely on people from outside the state to come here. Southern California has spent a lot of the last 2 years in Santa Barbara because it's the place where the beach was open when theirs were closed, and it's easy to get to. And it doesn't involve getting on an airplane. It may be expensive, but it's a little bit different than actually taking a major trip somewhere. So you're very familiar with the Creeks Fund and all the environmental related programs they do. But I'd also point out all of the wonderful creek restoration projects that we talk about and they're experiencing, the Arroyo Burro Open Space. We've been able to acquire new land for parks using Creeks Fund money as well as grants, and then also enhance existing parks through restoration initiatives, which really enhance our parks for our community. This gives the commission a little sense of how that revenue trend has changed over time. We had a dip down in 2020. Again, that's the pandemic, and a big bounce back in 21, and an even larger one in 2022. So the budget versus the actual revenue. And the revenue that's accrued to this fund in excess of budget goes into a reserve account. So operational challenges and opportunities, I mentioned earlier, vacancies, recruitment, retention. We've had over 50% turnover. We had to release hundreds of hourly staff at the onset of the pandemic, and building that staff back up has been a real challenge for a number of reasons. At the same time, the public demand for special events has increased in recreation services and outdoor use of outdoor areas because everybody went outside. And we did not get additional funding to support that. Increasing costs to do business, mentioned water, so when water rates go up, they go up for us too. Fuel's gone up for everyone. And then just the cost of buying materials. We have a number of outdated recreation amenities. When we go to our capital presentation in November, we'll be reminded of that. And We have much work to do to deal with our aging infrastructure. We've been really successful advancing a number of improvements over the years, but we have areas we haven't even touched, like Mission Historical Park and the historic resources there. And then we have just increased tourism, as I mentioned in a previous slide. We estimate there's probably more than 4 million visitors in Santa Barbara that go to our parks and beaches annually, in addition to the folks that live here. We were asked to present opportunities to do things differently, and one of the recommendations we have that we would be reviewing with the commission at a future date is actually coming up with a approved fee and cost recovery policy. Commissioner Longstreet will remember the trials and tribulations of the economic downturn, where we had to really weigh what we were going to continue to do, even if we didn't have revenue because it was the right thing to do, and what we weren't going to continue to do for other reasons. We have co-sponsorship policies and agreements with over 130 organizations. We're taking a close look at those and determining maybe we need to restructure them a little bit in order to better support the service we provide for those organizations. And then specifically service priorities. Are there things maybe we may not want to do anymore if there's someone else who can do them? We're open to that discussion. I think there's always an expectation that we do everything, or something new comes along and we'll do that too. There's a point at which we can't just keep adding things to our plate. This last bullet is something that the City Council has specifically asked that every department review its advisory committees in terms of the amount of resources that are expended supporting those. We've actually gone from 17 to 6 or 7. So when I first started in the department, we had 17. Now we have 7 exactly. So at the same time, advisory committees are important because they're advisory committees, and we engage with the community on so many different levels. It gives members of the community the opportunity to engage on a different level. And that concludes a very fast presentation, but hopefully gives the commission a little bit of insight into what we were asked to provide to the Finance Committee, and also what we may come back to you with for discussion items related to, are there ways to make this department more fiscally sustainable while still providing the services that the community deserves, and that we may be uniquely positioned to provide because we are a local agency, governmental agency. So that's it. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Director Zachary. Okay, I recognize it's late and that this is a lot of really detailed information. Actually, having looked at it, I thought it was really important that everybody see this because it's such a grounding in the breadth and depth of this department. Recognizing it's late and it was a lot of information, and I am still absorbing it, and it's my second time around. Are there any questions or comments for Director Zachary?
I would just wonder if we could have the presentation emailed to us. I think it would be good for us to have that to go over ourselves, kind of more quietly and in detail. But it was very useful, thank you. It was a good overview of all areas.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my 2 cents of 2 things is, and you know, language is language, but sometimes language speaks volumes. I hate the word subsidy. It just implies that there's something wrong. You know, we're doing something wrong, and we need to be bailed out. When, in fact, it's the city choosing. You know, it's taxpayer money, and it's the city and the community saying, how do we prioritize these expenditures? And it strikes me that these are really important priorities that we're talking about. I suspect I'm preaching to the choir on that. I guess the other one that concerns me, and this comes from my corporate background on having lived through this so many times, it's always concerning when what you call forward-facing departments are discussed and reviewed, and there's this big bucket called allocated expenditures that just kind of skates by because it's sort of in the too hard bucket. And I know this is not one for you, it's for other entities, but in my perfect world, I'd be looking at the expenditures and that go out into allocations before I'd be looking at those direct community forward-facing areas. But that's just my perfect world.
I guess Parks and Recreation is and I would include the library in this. They're who we want to be as a city. We have to do police and fire, and we all know we need it. But Parks and Recreation is kind of who we are. It's what we show the public. It's how we take care of our people. We don't do mental health services. We're not, in those fields that the county handles. But this is how, we take care of our children and families. And I would hope as the budget moves forward in these deep dives, they would remember that every one of those kids that goes to summer fun would be home alone, many of them, or home without an engaging activity. And I don't want to put that money into police later because we didn't put it into recreation earlier. And it is as clear to me as that. So, thank you. It's why I spend my time here. So, I think it's really important, and I hope council thinks the same thing.
Does anybody else have anything? Okay.
I agree with Commissioner Longstreet, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. It's Parks and Recreation that creates a community that's worth protecting by police and fire. Because if you have a life where we can't, revel in the beauty of our city and we can't create community, we don't have those opportunities to relax and enjoy what we have, what's worth protecting?
Okay. With that, thank you very much. This will help when we go into budgets. And I think there is no old business. Well, we've done the old business. That was arts and crafts. That was new business. So that takes us to adjournment. And this meeting is hereby adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody.